So thank you, councillors. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting, and I'd like to ask the Mayor's Chaplain, the Reverend Helena Del Pino, to say prayers for us.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all again, and thank you once again for your dedication to this city and its people. I hope you all have a chance over the summer to find some time for rest and recreation. Let us take a moment of silence now to turn our hearts towards the people we serve and the needs of our communities. Dear God, we give thanks for our city of Peterborough and for all who live, work and visit here. We pray for your blessing upon the work of this council and give thanks for those who have served this city down the years. Praying especially tonight for former council member Sheila Scott, who has recently died. We pray for unity of purpose and shared vision for the good of this city. Grant to all members and officers the grace to handle differences of opinion and approach without conflict. And where conflict has arisen, may all work together for resolution and harmony. In these times of economic challenge and fear, give us all compassion and wise discernment to respond positively to members of the public in need and to show forbearance where distress manifests as anger. We give thanks for all those helping to resolve this council's financial issues and are grateful that the situation is showing signs of improvement. We pray for peace in our communities and for the flourishing of all people and the natural world. May the words spoken here tonight be words that build hope and kindle a fire of love for this wonderful place, whose future we are entrusted with. Amen.
Thank you, Helena. And before we take our seats, Helena mentioned the fact that our former colleague Sheila Scott, who was a much admired councillor and cabinet member, passed away recently. So I'd like to ask you to join me in having 1 minute silence. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you'd now like to take your seats. Thank you, members. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting. I'd like to welcome those officers and guests who are in the council chamber. I don't think there's anybody in the public gallery, but there are probably people watching us on the live stream. So I will now hand over to Pippa Turvey to go through some housekeeping points.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, can all those present please ensure that all mobile phones are set to silent? In the event of an evacuation, please exit through the doors on both sides of the chamber, following council staff to the assembly point. As per normal rules, if you wish to speak, please ensure that you raise your hand and you will be invited to address the meeting. The Mayor has confirmed that he is happy for members to remain seated when addressing the Chamber. All votes will be taken via the electronic voting system. If a recorded vote is requested, this will be taken in the normal way. There is a points of document. If you wish to raise a point, please raise the pink document and address the Mayor accordingly, stating which point you are raising. Finally, I would remind members that this meeting is being live streamed, so please make sure that when you speak, you are using your microphone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So agenda item 1, are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have apologies from Councillor Dennis Jones, Councillor Alison Jones, Councillor Cole, Councillor Hasib, Councillor Ayres, Councillor Bisbee and Councillor Knight.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, are there any declaration of interest from councillors that are not already recorded separately on their individual register of interests? I'm not seeing any, so thank you. Agenda item 3, I would like to move approval of the minutes from the full council meeting that took place on the 21st of June. Do I have someone willing to second that?
I'm happy to do so, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. So, unless there are any objections, I will take that as agreed. That is agreed then, thank you. So, Mayor's announcements. For this and future council meetings, we've reverted to a previous practice of issuing a full list to councillors of all the engagements that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor have actually undertaken since the last full council meeting. So that means I just need at this meeting to highlight just a few of them. So we were pleased to welcome personnel from the United States Air Force Base at Alconbury to a small reception in the Mayor's Parlour to thank them for the work that they do as part of the NATO alliance in keeping us all safe and in protecting freedom and democracy. In taking forward my aim of engaging with local companies, I was invited to an Opportunity Peterborough bondholders breakfast at the beginning of July. The Mayoress and I also had a very positive meeting with Paul Bristow, one of Peterborough's Members of Parliament, who is keen to support us in our mayoral work and in particular in our charity fundraising. I'd just like to remind you that we're holding Meet the Mayor open days, which begin are from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on the first Friday, and that's happening every month, including August. So please, these are open to anyone who wants to come. Please pass on invitations to people in your wards. And you know, we will be inviting certain groups, for instance, people from care homes to come, but anybody can turn up. We've also got a Mayor of Peterborough Facebook page, which shows photographs of the mayoral events that we've undertaken. And I know quite a few councillors are quite active on social media, so it would be really helpful if you could go and like the page and actually share some of the posts. Once again, I'm grateful to Alderman Saltmarsh for providing light refreshments after the meeting, and I'd like to invite all councillors, officers and any members of the public who are present to actually join me for some food and a chat in the Mayor's Parlour. If you don't know where the Mayor's Parlour is, it's actually through here. And the final point, on Saturday 2nd of September, as has happened in previous years, Cricket East are organising a community cohesion cricket match where a combined council and police team play against a joint Moss team. So I know there's one or two councillors who are keen on cricket like myself, so if you are interested in participating in that, please could you contact me. Thank you. So we now move to item 5, leaders' announcements. Councillor Fitzgerald, I understand you wished to make an announcement. And you have up to 5 minutes for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you don't mind, I feel more comfortable standing. Just allows me to distance the papers from my glasses. I'd like to begin tonight by welcoming John Gregg as the new Executive Director of Children's Services. John started with the Council earlier this month and joined us from Coventry City Council, where he took children's services there from inadequate to good. He's got a career spanning involving 30 years working with children's services, 28 of those as a social worker, and he's also held roles within Ofsted. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say welcome to Peterborough, John. From a high to a low now, I'm sure you're all aware that our Democratic and Constitutional Services Manager, Pippa Turvey, will be leaving us soon, in fact just a couple of days' time for pastures new. Pippa, who sits in view of us all at these meetings, started at the Council back in 24 as a fresh-faced, still looks fresh-faced, senior Democratic Services Officer, and it wasn't long before her talents were noticed by officers, and in 2016 she stepped up to the role of Democratic and Constitutional Services Manager. I know the respect and high regard we all hold for Pippa, and knowing how demanding we all can be, more some than others. Of course, for the benefit of the Council, patience and calmness, she's guided us through the world of governance and decision-making. So it leaves me to say, on behalf of us all, good luck at your role in South Cambs. I'm sure it will be only mere months before you miss us all. And also, just while I'm doing, we'll miss also Emma Rogers, who tells me, well, I know she's going to be a mum. It's fairly obvious. I haven't seen her for a few weeks, but she's 5 weeks to go, so I don't think we'll see her for a little while. So may I wish her well in motherhood as she approaches the birth of the baby in about 5 weeks' time. So congratulations, Emma. Moving on, you may have seen on the Council's social media channels that I was in London last week to talk to the government with the rest of the leaders of fast-growth cities. We were there to show how we can assist in accelerating the UK's economic growth in return for devolved powers and extra investment. Peterborough can help with this because we are on the cusp of a growth and regeneration revolution. As you've heard me say, we've already got significant regeneration plan for the development of key areas of our city, like the station, quarter and university. We have a clear vision of how we want to expand and attracting private investment into the city. Now is absolutely the right time to supercharge this growth as we're working on our local plan, which many of you will know, and take part in its development, and that will form the city's blueprint until 2036. We now have those foundations in place, we have the appetite, and we are ready to grow. 2 weeks ago, our new Children's Services Director made his first public appearance at the launch of the first of 3 family hubs at First Steps Children's Centre in Welland, and he's here tonight, of course. If you recall, the Council secured £3.5 million from government to deliver the Family Hubs programme, which simply put is all about making it quicker and simpler for families to get practical support. There are more on the way in Paston and in Orton, and by improving access to services and bringing support under one roof, these hubs will help families overcome challenges and should ultimately help to improve the outcomes of children and young people and their families. And finally, I'd like to celebrate the fact that 3 of the city's parks and open spaces have once again received the prestigious Green Flag Award. This means that Central Park, Itter Park and Manor Farm Park are some of the best open spaces in the country. For Central Park, it's the 21st consecutive year that the park has held the award, which is remarkable but not surprising. I must share this achievement with Aragon, and it's thanks to their hard work and dedication of the teams working there that these spaces are maintained to such high standards. The parks are also supported by very proactive friends of groups who help promote the use and care of the park's facilities with their communities, seeking funding and park improvements, and provide valuable feedback to the Council and in turn Aragon. We are fully committed to creating a greener city and reducing carbon emissions. We also know how much quality green spaces matter to residents and will continue to maintain them to the highest standards. Lot going on. We won't have any more updates in the next month, Mr. Mayor, but that's it for now, and I'll pass back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. So at this point, each of the party group leaders has up to 1 minute to respond to the points that Councillor Fitzgerald has made. For Labour Group, Councillor Jones isn't here, so I understand that Councillor Iqbal is going to respond. So Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Labour Group, I would also like to welcome John Craig to his new role as the Executive Director of Children's Services. We look forward to benefiting from your experience and expertise. As already mentioned, we all are aware that our Democratic and Constitutional Services Manager, Pippa Trevi will be leaving us and joining South Cambs. With no shadow of doubt, all members held Pippa in high regards for her cooperation, where is she? Guidance and professionalism in dealing with council-related matters. Pippa, we wish you good luck in your new role. Through our collaborative approach with reference to FSWG, we the opposition groups are looking forward to build on the foundations we have laid in the best interest of the city, especially working on the local plan, the station quarter, the university and many more projects. We congratulate the council officers for securing 3.5 million from the government to deliver the Family Hubs programme. We welcome the launch of the Family Hub at First Steps Children's Centre in Welland and the other two to open in the coming weeks in Paston and Orton. These hubs, no doubt, will help families overcome challenges and improve outcomes of their issues. This is clearly the right to support at the earliest opportunity to make the difference. It is clearly a moment of celebration.
Draw your remarks to a close now. You're actually open.
Thank you. Three of the city parks have open spaces once again received the prestigious Green Flag Award. Clary Aragon and other stakeholders deserve to be recognised and congratulated for their hard work in maintaining the high standard. Well done. Working collaboratively with clarity, transparency and openness is the key to success and will enable us to meet our commitments to creating
I think
a green city and reducing
we,
carbon emissions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me
you.
that extra time.
Councillor Harper, I'd like to respond for the Peterborough First Group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I claim the 90 as well, please? 1 minute and 30.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to John Gregg. We wish you the very best of success in the future in your new role. On behalf of us all at Peterborough First, may I offer our sincere thanks to Pippa for all her hard work and guidance whilst working here at Peterborough City Council. We wish her the very best in her new role in South Cambs and know that our loss is most certainly their gain. At Peterborough First, we welcome the push for growth, but this must go hand in hand with the need to provide the other vital services such as hospitals, doctors, dentists and schools. And this must not be, as we have recently witnessed, growth at any cost. It's great news about the Family Hub, and I'm sure that they will be very used and welcomed. Finally, Mr. Mayor, if I may, this council recently unanimously signed up to a comprehensive and far-reaching set of values for members and officers. We members of Peterborough First think the taxpayers of the city expect and indeed deserve to be assured that all members will follow these values and try to replace some of the trust lost over the last few months under this administration. Mr. Mayor, the current leader's recent baseless comments in the media and other councillors and the current MP's behaviour in the House of Commons and elsewhere is just unacceptable and certainly doesn't live up to these new values. For the sake of the residents of this city, Mr. Mayor, we must do better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I'd now like to call upon Councillor Hogg for the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great to see that John Gregg is in post now. It will be interesting to see how he and Stephen Taylor evolve our children's and adult services going forward. Sad to see Pippa leave the council, truly a great asset. And I would suggest that she will be leaving some big shoes behind that need filling. I would guess that perhaps she was attracted by the 4-day week working that they brought in there at South Cambs, and I'm sure that Bridget Smith will be able to make good use of her skills. Regarding the growth in the city, which I agree is a good thing, but we must not get tunnel vision on this rapid growth to the exclusion of what we already have in this great city. We not only need to attract new businesses and people to the city, but we need to look after those that are already here and make sure our services are being correctly maintained and replaced where necessary. Great to see the opening of these new family hubs. I can't help but think they very closely resemble the Sure Start centres that were closed en masse by a previous Conservative administration. Hopefully they will be rolled out and become a permanent feature in our city. Fantastic news regarding the Green Flag Awards again this year. A big thank you to the Mayor for championing the continuation of the involvement in this scheme, which only a couple of years ago was in jeopardy due to budget cuts, and to which he advocated that to change the way that we approach the accreditation, save costs and increase sustainability.
Thank you. Even though you are praising me,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Hogg, I do have to cut you off, I'm afraid, to be fair and consistent.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we now move to Councillor Nicola Day for the Green Party.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Green Group would also like to welcome John Greggs to the Council as the Executive Director of Children's Services. As well, we wish the very best for the future to Pippa Turvey, who has not only helped myself and the Green Group, but I'm sure all members here in the Chamber. We wish you the very best for the future. Whilst we recognise devolved powers and extra investment for the city in relation to being leaders of fast growth cities, we would also like to insist that the growth that we welcome to Peterborough is green and sustainable growth that aligns with our carbon reduction targets. Economic growth must not supersede our planetary boundaries. It is great to hear that the 3 of the city's parks and open spaces have received the Green Flag Award, and it is up to us to ensure that all the city's green spaces are highly maintained going forwards. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I'd just like to add my own personal comment, actually, to the very sad news that Pippa Turvey is leaving us. Before I was mayor, I preceded Councillor Hogg as leader of the Liberal Democrat group, and I think when you're the leader of an opposition group, sometimes you have this view that everybody's against you, and I think it's fair to say that Pippa and I on occasions have had a few heated conversations over things, but I've always found her really straightforward, really professional, and so I think it's a real sad day for the council that she's leaving, but I understand the gentleman who is replacing her is of equal competence, so that's really good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I propose a round of applause, please, for Pippa?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so we now move to questions on notice by members of the public, which is agenda item 6. There's been one question submitted by a member of the public, so that's question 1 from Mr. John Bradshaw. Mr. Bradshaw, would you like to ask your question in relation to the Armed Services Covenant and access to bus services? You've got 3 minutes to actually ask your question. Councillor Simons has got 3 minutes to respond, and then you've got 1 minute if you want to ask a further question that arises from it. So thank you very much.
Thank you and good evening. Peterborough City Council has adopted an armed services covenant. This provides for the promotion of fair access to a wide range of services, including health. Please explain how the failure to provide a regular bus service to Wittering is consistent with the principles of Peterborough City Council's Armed Services Covenant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being so concise. Councillor Nigel Simons, would you like to respond to the question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Mr. Bradshaw. We are proud to maintain our commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant and fully recognise the need for a bus service for Wittering and other villages. Passenger transport is a function of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. We are working closely with them on future plans and service provisions. The Combined Authority are updating their bus service improvement plan, and one of their priorities is to achieve more service provision in rural areas. The Combined Authority are also investigating whether to do bus franchising, which will be viable, and later this year they will be reviewing all subsidised services to make decisions on what services should be funded next year. We'll be making the case for the need for a bus service for Wittering and all the other villages. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Mr. Bradshaw, do you have a supplementary question?
I don't have a further question, but I would like to just request that it's good news that you're having these consultations. Please bear in mind the very difficult transport choices faced by the residents of Wittering, which can be not to go to the doctors or the dentist, or to walk alongside the A1 with traffic travelling at up to 70 miles an hour in order to get to the doctors and dentists. Please bear this in mind with your deliberations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Simons, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, I certainly will be advocating. Rural services has good provision. I will certainly be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, agenda item 7 is petitions. Those presenting petitions this evening will have up to 1 minute to outline the subject matter of their petition. So are there any petitions been submitted by members of the public?
No, Mr Mayor.
Right, okay. So are there any petitions that members of the council have? I'm looking round, but I don't see any, so that's fine. Okay. Right, so we now move to items 8A to 8C on the agenda, which is questions on notice. There have been 11 questions submitted by councillors this evening to Cabinet members. To save time, all questions have been published on the council website, and we'll take them as read, so go straight to the response. We have up to half an hour for this, so if people could keep their questions and answers as concise as possible, that would be really helpful. So we go first of all to question 1 from Councillor John Fox. Councillor Simons, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor John Fox in relation to litter?
Yes, Mr Mayor, happy to do that. Thank you for your question, Mr Councillor Fox. The Council does not currently instruct Aragon to undertake any routine works to remove grass that is encroaching onto footpaths across the city. This work is currently only undertaken as and when it prevents a risk from highways perspective and is requested by a local highways inspector. That said, I would like to extend my gratitude to those volunteers who have undertaken such work, and I welcome any suggestions from any councillors that any such work is needed. We'll work with probationary service to try to remove these troublesome areas.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Councillor John Fox, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr Mayor, and I'd also point out that I did try to use probationary services, but they wouldn't assist. So that avenue has been tried along with several other avenues. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when the contract for cutting grass was drawn up, it was not included a clause to trim the borders. Is that correct? Is the leader going to make sure that whatever contracts that are drawn up in the future, that will get them fully scrutinised by all councillors, not a select few, so as to avoid such ridiculous mistakes? Because cutting the grass obviously means doing the borders.
Thank you. Councillor Simons, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, yeah. Obviously, Councillor Fox, we'd love to be able to do this. You know, it's just finding the finance, and we have to think outside the box. But I'm happy to go back to Aragon and see if we can work something out. Thank you.
Councillor Simons, would you like to respond to that? Well, yeah, sorry. So we were just having a conversation, and I apologise for that. Right. So question number 2 from Councillor Skipstead. Councillor Simons, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Skipstead in relation to maintenance of trees?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I would. Thank you for your question, Councillor Skipstead. The Council Tree and Woodland Strategy offers limited scope for Council to fell or reduce trees, minimising overhanging or adjoining properties. These policies were introduced to maintain an effective, affordable and legally compliant service for the whole city. This approach in respect of overhanging trees was challenged in late 2021 when a paper was presented to Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet exploring options to amend the current approach taken. The resultant endorsed recommendations were to retain the existing approach, as it was considered that the introduction of exemptions would be counterproductive and would risk harm and progress made to date in respect of tree management. Minor amendments were, however, introduced at the time to add clarity on operational guidelines, particularly in relation to when action will be taken because of daylight loss.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Councillor Skipstead, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. Thank you for your response, Councillor Simons, but the reason I've raised this is because I've had many residents come to me who can't afford to sort out their trees. They've grown very, very tall over the last 40 years, and some of them are disabled and they just cannot do it, they can't afford to do it. What can we do to help these residents who have got trees literally overhanging their gardens, they've got no daylight at all, or they can't grow anything? I just want to know what we can say to residents who come with these issues, because it seems unfair. These are not their trees. They've been planted by the council, and yeah, what could you offer? How can we help them? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simon.
Yeah, thanks for the supplementary question. I think we have to remember we've got 50,000 trees in the residential areas, and we have to be very careful, obviously, how they are, how we treat them, really, to be honest. I think you could use your CLF, and I think every individual tree we will look at, if you've got a problem with a certain tree, we'll just get our tree officers to take a look. There's no easy answer. I'd love to say there is, but there is no easy answer.
Okay, thank you for that. Question number 4 from Councillor Howard. Councillor Coles, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Howard in relation to the Hilton Hotel?
Mr Mayor, we've missed question 3.
Sorry, I've missed. Yeah, sorry. Right, okay. Question number 3 from Councillor Mohammed Farouk. Councillor Coles, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Mohammed Farouk in relation to the budget?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I would. And thank you, Councillor Farouk, for your question. We made a commitment that we'd refresh and report on a quarterly basis the latest MTFS projections. This is because we recognise the environment we operate in is ever-changing. We want to be fully abreast of the financial impact of any such changes so we can review and take action to ensure we deliver a balanced budget, but also to be transparent about this with members and with our residents. You mention a budget shortfall. It's actually a forecast budget gap, and the rise can be pinpointed in very few key areas. This most significant one is in children's services, and it has arrived in between the February figure, you'll know, when we had the budget outturn of £600,000 underspend, and it has now risen to this number. And it's been all about additional costs of services. There's also pressure because of the National Pay Award offer that's coming up, and inflation also has an impact on that number. But it should be noted that these are just predictions at this stage, and the budget shortfall will come down. Equally, it could increase, but it's one of those figures that changes all the time. At this stage, nothing is off the table. The budget setting process began in early July, which will start with a detailed review of all budgets. Officers, Cabinet and the FSWG will work on developing strategies to mitigate any rising pressures, in addition to developing savings and transformation plans. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Mohammed Farouk, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coles. When I prepared this question, I hadn't seen the papers went out, and now I've seen the papers. Page 95 of the council papers, it says budget gap of 24-25 of 5.1 million, rising to 10 million for 25-26. But on the next paragraph, it also says that current savings of 5 million are at risk of non-delivery. Is that total gap of around 15 million then, or? Thank you.
Thank you for the supplementary. I think we're conflating two things here. The waterfall I think you're referring to looks at those particular risks that are either easy to deliver, cause some risks, and those that are going to be hard to deliver. So that's that 5 million you're thinking of. It's over the entire year we will be attempting to deliver on the budget that we currently have, and then we will be dealing with the additional problems that come up during the year by reprofiling the budget as we go. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. I apologise for the hiatus earlier. We're having some difficulty finding the relevant page, but we've now found it. It's all sorted out. Right, so we now move to question 4 from Councillor Howard. Councillor Coles, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Howard in relation to the Hilton Hotel?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, I would, and thank you, Councillor Howard, for the question. £14.9 million of the £15 million loan facility has been drawn by Fletton Quays Hotel Limited. Each drawdown request is fully reviewed by the Council's quantity surveyor, and only once approved is drawdown authorised and made. The loan remains fully secured against the property, and it continues to generate an income for the Council and our taxpayers. The loan facility is a standard construction loan facility, and in accordance with this type of facility, repayments are made at the end of the facility. There are regular meetings with the developer, and to date the Council has not been asked to extend the loan beyond the 31st of December. If such a request is made, a decision will be made which is in the best interest of the Council and our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Howard, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do, and thank you, Councillor Coles, for answering the question. Of course, we all want the hotel to be a success. There's no doubt about that. However, why should officers have to spend their time and focus worrying about the loan's security to private enterprises rather than spending time concentrating on the council services to our public and working on the rising budget deficit? I'm sure you would agree. If the loan is defaulted on, are we prepared by monitoring the progress of the build and fit out to ascertain the likely cost of completion of this project? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Howard will know, having been in Cabinet at the time, about the challenges that we had with this particular item, and we're simply dealing with the reality of the impact of COVID on the ability of the people within the construction industry to be able to deliver, and also the impact on inflation from that, and also the Russian attacks on Ukraine, which has elevated the cost of building materials, which has caused the problems for the delay. As I've said, it's fully secured against the property, so if there were to be a default, then we would receive the property in full, and that's worth a heck of a sight more than the loan that we had. You'll remember also that when we got the loan, it was a process through the PWLB system, which is that we could assist in the build of the hotel to improve that whole area of the city. And it's only really the circumstances that have conspired against us through COVID and also through the war with Russia against Ukraine that we've got these particular issues of completing this on the original time scale.
Okay, thank you. So we now move to question 5 from Councillor Harper. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Harper in relation to the sale of the vine?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's fallen to me to answer tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Harper, for the question. Officers within the Council are currently in negotiations with an interested party to purchase the former TK Maxx and New Look building, which is 62 to 68 Bridge Street. The current proposal will ensure that the Council achieves a figure in excess of the original purchase price. It should also be noted that the Council is required to achieve best value as governed by Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Coles, for your answer. If we actually include the costs to the actual purchase price that's been publicly announced, we're looking probably more realistically at £4.5 million. Can Councillor Coles in this case assure us and the Council that the sale price will be in excess of this £4.5 million plus any additional cost to sell this building? I'll refer you back to when the financial officer insisted we must not sell our assets for a lower price than they are worth. The hydrotherapy pool being a classic example. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Coles, would you like to respond to the supplementary question?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Harper, for the supplementary. Can't obviously go into the financial details, that's an exempt matter, but I'm reassured by our officers that we will be making money on the deal. And I think that's about as far as I'm able to go in terms of that. But I'm not entirely sure about your figure of 4.5 million, but I accept that you've got that from somewhere. I don't have it in front of me. If you want more detail, I'll be very happy to get it for you.
Okay, thank you. Question number 6 from Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Iqbal in relation to transparency of the decision-making process?
I think it's Councillor Coles again, actually, because it comes under him.
Okay, Councillor Coles then.
I do apologise, Mr. Mayor, it's me again. Thank you, Councillor Iqbal, for your question. As you're aware, there are times that the Council will have a commercial or sensitive matters to deal with, and the approach that we take as a Council will continue to be advised by officers. As I've said in this chamber on many occasions, my door is always open for any member, and this also goes for my Cabinet team. They too can have discussions on matters that remain confidential. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, in that case, Councillor Iqbal, do you have a supplementary question?
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No supplementary, thank you very much. So we now move to question number 7 from Councillor Kayum. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Kayum in relation to Cabinet member attendance at scrutiny?
It's always a pleasure to respond to questions from Councillor Kayum. I look forward to them, and I'm pleased I've got one myself this month to answer. So, as you are aware, Councillor Kayum members, there is no standing requirement for Cabinet members or advisers to attend scrutiny meetings. However, if scrutiny chairs, such as yourself, wish to receive information regarding matters on adults or health, or any matter really, from myself or advisers or any member of the Cabinet, this can be done via Democratic Services or by contacting us directly. What I would say is where I've been advised or there is a requirement for me to attend, to present a report or to support officers, I've always done so. There was no such requirement on this particular occasion, but had you asked me, I would have come if I was available. I'm always happy to attend and speak to members about the good work we're doing over this side, as well as the good chairing you're doing, no doubt, on the committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kayum, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know that you'd been chosen as the Cabinet member for that portfolio by that time, Councillor Fitzgerald, but thank you very much for your answer. Now, the reason why I asked this question is at the last full council meeting, I asked about disability provision and policy within the city, and I got a very helpful response. It was very comprehensive. I'd like to thank you. However, there was still no stipulated citywide disability provision or policy within those answers. Hence the reason why I feel that it's important for Cabinet members and advisers to attend such meetings so you are privy to information on the ground within the remit of these scrutiny committee meetings. Therefore, may I ask, can you pledge that you will attend at least 60 to 80% of those meetings, or the Cabinet advisers? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Time is also always precious, as you know, whether it's for me or for other people, or maybe elsewhere, London, other meetings. Brian and David have taken over the joint roles because, as you know, we had a change forced upon us, which was, just one of those things, and we've had to get on and deal with it. If I would have been free that day, I probably would have come. I do attend scrutiny meetings, but it is generally by request or where there is a requirement from officers. So I think a bit of liaison between yourself and other scrutiny chairs, because I wouldn't imagine it just applies to health and social care, and most members will be accommodating. But what I would suggest is where there's particularly things on the agenda that you feel may benefit from some Cabinet input or advisor input, in order that that information is shared, then perhaps chairs can be encouraged to discuss that with the Democratic Services team and inquire about availability. That's what I'll commit to. The other thing is about the disability issue. I very much accept that there's a lot of work to be done on that. And I know there are many people, Councillor Fox is very passionate, both of them in fact, and others, Brian Tyler as well. So if we can improve that area of our work, I would support and welcome that. And any suggestions that people have on how we might do it, then we should all collectively perhaps have that discussion. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we move to question 8 from Councillor Elsey. Councillor Coles, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Elsey in relation to the cost of decoupling from Cambridgeshire?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would, and thank you, Councillor Elsey, for your question. I don't think I'd describe the shared services with Cambridgeshire as an experiment or as a failure. At the time that the authority took part in this shared service, a number of local authorities entered into these sort of agreements to generate cost savings and also to generate economies of scale. In reality, the anticipated savings rarely materialised, and resources were often spread too thinly, with officers trying to cover 2 posts for organisations with different pressures and priorities. Nationally, numerous other such shared service arrangements have come to an end. Peterborough City Council's in a precarious financial position, and it's now considered right to have dedicated resources to concentrate on services for Peterborough only. There will be financial pressures, in particular in children's services, However, these will largely be covered within existing budgets. However, an additional £1.4 million in the current financial year has been added to the budget, funded from reserves. It should also be noted that some shared services continue to work well and will remain in place, for example, public health. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Elsie, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in essence, we followed the pack. We didn't do anything innovative. I and others told the then leader and his deputy that this system wouldn't work and that we would end up with officers who were too thinly spread, and that we would suffer as a consequence. Our thoughts were overruled because the thought process was it looks good now, and provided it gets us the requisite votes, it's fine. The people of Peterborough need to know the full facts, so my supplementary question is in several parts. The first part is, how many good officers did this authority lose to half-committed officers from Cambridge? How much did we pay in redundancy payments to these officers? How many of these Cambridge officers are still here? How much is it costing to recruit new officers to the posts we already had? And what impact has this upheaval had on frontline services? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I think you are supposed to ask just one supplementary question, so if you need to respond to that in written form, you may want to, but can we have an answer to that then?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'll try. I think if I might take those away and write back to you, Councillor Elsie, with those specific questions. I don't have that detail ahead of me. In fact, you have the advantage of me because I think you were in Cabinet at the time and I wasn't, so you're probably more privy to those arguments than I was. I don't know whether we were just following the pack. I think we were one of the leading of that pack to make those decisions to save money. And what we have seen, and you might be right in your predictions actually, that there were some issues there which I explained in my first answer. But what we're looking to do is to make sure that Peterborough has a Peterborough response to Peterborough needs. I will try to answer all those other questions that you're asking. But one point I think I would say is that what we have noticed is that as we are moving from a shared service to Peterborough, a number of the former Peterborough officers that then were shared with Cambridgeshire are coming back. So I'll work those figures out for you and make sure you have those accurate answers, but I can't give you the full detail at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So we now move to question 9 from Councillor Kayum. Councillor Thresti, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Kayum in relation to the station quarter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. This particular project focuses on the creation of an enhanced gateway station, including a new western entrance, which I think will be a marvellous improvement, and improved passenger facilities and accessibility to the city, including disabled access, pedestrian and cycle connections. It took me half an hour this evening to get across Crescent Bridge, and I think hopefully once this project goes ahead, that will be a thing of the past. The project will also broadly deliver economic growth, levelling up, and provide a catalyst for wider regeneration of the city. It will improve accessibility and journey quality at and around the important station and the station quarter. We hope less congestion on surrounding highway networks, and it may very well also help health and well-being to improve. This government funding is ring-fenced to the station and its environs. However, it will also act as a catalyst for development for the wider area around the station as future phases of the project come forward. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kayum, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Tereste, could I just confirm before I ask my supplementary? So there is going to be a redevelopment of the footbridge as per my first question.
The exact detail of the footbridge I can't tell you because I don't have the information, but I'm quite happy to check it out for you and send you a response. Pardon? Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. We don't know yet because obviously we've got people in working the appraisal, but I will let you know as soon as we find out, yeah?
So was that your supplementary question then?
No, it wasn't. I just wanted to clarify because that was in my first question around the footbridge. But my supplementary?
Yeah, be concise.
Okay, so it was just around whether the fact that when we do, if it is part of the redevelopment, are we going to be having an asbestos survey, and will removal of that asbestos be part of that inclusive ring-fenced funding that you're getting from central government, or will you have to procure that from somewhere else? That was all.
Councillor Suresti.
I mean, at this stage, I don't even know, and I don't think there is asbestos. We haven't got that far to find out. As I said, I'm quite happy to keep the councillor informed. If she drops me a note, I'll make sure I get all the answers for her if I can.
Okay, thank you. If we have concise answers and questions, we should get all the questions in. So question 10 is from Councillor Howard. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor Howard in relation to cabinet attendance?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm so pleased that Councillor Howard is still taking an interest in all that goes on in Cabinet and is an avid watcher. He'd be pleased to know I was also watching myself, even though I was on holiday. Firstly, just to correct the situation, there were not 4 Cabinet members away on the 10th of July. Jackie Allen is a Cabinet advisor, as you know, not a Cabinet member, thus has no effect on any decision-making process of Cabinet. There were, in fact, 3, as I said, not at the meeting. One of those was me, I was on holiday. One of those was Councillor Allen, who was also on holiday, longer than me, as a matter of fact, he had a whole week. And Lynn Ayres, very unfortunately, was very, very poorly and remains so now because for those that are keeping a close watch on things, Lynn had a knee operation that unfortunately went very wrong, and she got E. coli, which is a very serious infection, and left her incapacitated. She is thankfully recovering now, but not well enough to attend tonight. But before anything was booked, I checked with Democratic Services. The meeting was still quorate and was well chaired by Councillor Coles, as I watched online. All matters considered on the agenda that day had already been fully discussed, as you would know, Councillor Howard, in various forums like CPF and indeed pre-Cabinet and elsewhere. So there was no issue, there was no problem, the meeting was quorate and business was conducted in the usual way.
Thank you. I wonder if it might be a good idea, in view of what you said about Councillor Ayres, if we could ask the Chief Executive perhaps to pass on our good wishes to her, because it does sound really unfortunate situation. And so, Councillor Howard, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do, and thank you, Leader, for answering the question. I am still interested, and watching what goes on, you'll be glad to know. We all wish Councillor Ayres well, of course, but if it was appropriate, if it was applicable to any member, would you help that if some members of the Cabinet were enjoying the hospitality of friends of the current administration during this time out of office, they would update their gifts and hospitalities record with the monitoring officer within the required time?
Yes, if that was a requirement, but in this case it wasn't. I have no idea what you mean by friends of this administration. If you really want to know, I went to a friend's birthday party that I've known for 35 years, that has no dealings with this administration, and is in fact one of the Deputy Lord Lieutenants, which is wholly inappropriate and not political at all, Councillor Howard, but you should know that. So I have no idea what you're talking about, really, and why would I declare something that I paid for myself? And by the way, I was never on a boat, just so you know.
Okay, thank you. The final question is from Councillor John Fox. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to respond to the question from Councillor John Fox in relation to all-out election?
I'm baffled and flattered at the same time that Councillor Fox thinks this is anything to do with me, when it isn't. To be clear, I, as leader of the council, did not bring the 4 yearly brackets all-out elections report to council. This I'm talking a few months ago. This was a requirement from the improvement panel, and the Secretary of State was the reason it came to council. You can check this with the Chief Executive, and the improvement panel have clearly stated that this report should be revisited at full council at some point, and I believe that's being discussed by officers. Early indications are, and again, not at my request, nothing to do with me, I believe that might be October, that there is some suggestion from officers that that may come back then, which is the expectation of the improvement panel. If you also read the improvement panel report that's later on in this agenda, you will see it says the very same thing. It's not something I'm pushing or doing. That was also the consensus of members back in whenever we discussed it last October, I believe. And therefore, as I'm informed, as I just said, it'll come back in October at full council for all members to consider again. That's all I know about it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor John Fox, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Is it not correct that you voted for it and then voted against it? And if that's the case, given there might be an all-out election in 2026 with a possibility boundary changes, what logic can there be in an all-out election? Please, can you explain, and will you personally be campaigning against it?
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Again, Councillor Fox, I have no idea what you mean that I voted for and against. I have no idea what that means. I think that was Andy Cole, as you may be talking about. I think I think, if from memory, but you'd have to check, I don't think I actually voted at all in my personal capacity as a member on that meeting. There was a number of mixture of votes, with some people voting for, some people voting against. Interestingly, Councillor Harper made a great deal of noise about that it should be voted through, which I hope is still his position if it does come back to council, on the basis it saved cost and all sorts of other reasons. I recall felt very strongly about it as Peterborough First. My position at the moment, and it is only a personal position, I don't think has changed. I'm neither for or against personally at the moment. If we have to have a vote again, it will come back, not at my request. It's coming back at the request of the panel and DLUC, and as expected by them. My view is just my view.
Sorry, Councillor Fox, what are you doing? Are you raising a point?
Point of explanation, Mr. Mayor.
Personal
explanation.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it not correct you voted all out for all out elections, but then vote against for last year?
I have no recollection of what you're talking about. A vote was put to council, I believe, and the vote was lost. My personal vote, but you'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure I abstained personally. I'm pretty sure I did. As for other people, but you know, whether I did vote for or against, it's neither here nor there. The vote was lost, and if we have another vote, it'll be a different vote.
Okay. I think if it's coming back to council in October, I think we can debate it again in October. Councillor Coles, what have you?
A point of personal explanation. I'm just to clarify this confusion. I was the one that proposed that because that was the requirement of my position. I voted against it because my personal view is, although I've always supported the idea of all-outs, I thought the timeliness was the issue, so that's why I voted against it. So if the confusion is about someone proposing it and then voting against it, that was my position, and that was the view that I took. So I just hope that clears that point up.
I think that's what I recall as well, but we're going to debate it again in October, so I don't think we're getting very far by just arguing about what happened previously. So right, okay, so that is all of the questions. It's really good that we've managed to get all the questions in. So we now move to agenda item 8D, which is questions on notice to members of the combined authority. There have not been any questions submitted relating to the combined authority, so we can move through that one. So we now move to agenda item 9A, which is in relation to the annual audit report. Councillor Rangzeb, would you like to move the recommendations of the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do.
Wish to speak on it?
Yes. At the Audit Committee meeting on 20th of March 2023, the Audit Committee considered its annual report outlining the work and items considered by the committee in 22-23 municipal year. The annual report also outlines some of the committee's achievements and some of the areas that Council and the committee need to consider over the course of next few years. As many of you will know, Chris Brooks, who was appointed as the independent chair, has had to unfortunately stand down. I would like to put on record my thanks and that of the councils for his work over the past 18 months. His chairing of the meeting and the challenges made to the officer along with the other independent members have started to have a real impact on the functionality of the committee. The report shows key information relating to the committee, its achievements during the year, and the key targets going forward. It will be imperative that the committee continues to effectively scrutinize the governance and the financial arrangements in place across the council. The report is presented to the council to raise awareness of the work of the committee in scrutinizing and challenging process in place to govern the organization. I therefore recommend that council notes the work undertaken by the audit committee and agrees the annual report. Thank you.
Thank you. I was actually on audit committee for 12 months, and I'd very much like to endorse what you said about the contribution of the independent members. It was really noticeable what an improvement that made. Councillor Perkins, would you like to second the recommendation, and would you like to speak now or reserve your right to speak later? Thank you. Are there any other people that wish to contribute? Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Appendix 1, page 31. The internal audit has identified several opportunities for improving control procedures, and the audit committee receives regular reports on the resolutions of these improvement opportunities. When are we likely to see an end on these regular reports on the resolutions?
Okay, if that's a question, then when Councillor Ranjep comes to do his summation, he can respond to that. Is there any other speakers who would like to speak? I'm not seeing anybody. In which case, I come back to Councillor Perkins, and you've reserved your right to speak. Would you like to speak at this point? Okay, in that case, we come back to Councillor Ranjeb. You can summate, and perhaps you'd like to respond to the question Councillor Iqbal put.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not so sure which report is he referring to, but we can look into it and come back to the councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. So, is this proposal agreed? It's agreed then, right? Thank you. Right. So we now move to agenda item 9B, which is in relation to the honorary recorder of the City of Peterborough. Councillor Hiller, would you like to remove this recommendation in your capacity as the chair of the Constitution Committee?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I thank you for the opportunity. At the meeting of the Constitution and Ethics Committee on the 17th of July, it was unanimously agreed to recommend that full council agree to the appointment of His Honour Judge John Bishop as the honorary recorder for the City of Peterborough. This honorary recorder appointment is unpaid, Mr. Mayor, and will maintain and develop the ongoing relationship between our council and the judiciary. The position is ceremonial and is normally granted to the resident judge at the Crown Court in the city. As such, the recorder would usually be invited to major civic events like Annual Council and Remembrance Sunday, and would similarly invite members of the council to attend significant judicial events. The role is personal to the individual, Mr. Mayor, and would last as long as His Honour Judge Bishop is in post. As protocol determines, we have written to the senior presiding judge for England, who has approved this proposed appointment for Peterborough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hiller. Councillor Sainsbury, would you like to second the recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the recommendation and reserve my right to speak.
Right, okay. Anybody else want to talk on this? No, so that's agreed then. Thank you. Right, so we now move to agenda item 10, which is the record of executive decisions that have happened since the last full council meeting, and you can find these on pages 67 to 72 of your agenda pack. I'll be inviting the leader to introduce the item, and any questions will be answered by the leader unless he refers them to another member. I would remind councillors that they should ask questions on the decisions in the report. All questions should be relevant to the decision itself. Should I feel that any preamble is unreasonably long, I will instruct the councillor to ask their question immediately. So, and also, can members please note, I will go through the page numbers slowly, but once I've moved on, we then can't accept a question from a previous page. So, Councillor Fitzgerald, could I ask you to introduce the item?
Mr. Mayor, happy to introduce this item, agenda number 10, and I'll take it as read and consider each page as you do them.
Thank you. So, we'll start with page 67, and we have a question from Councillor Amjad Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. It's page 67, Financial System Procurement 2023. Can the leader confirm that the agreement between Unit 4 Business Software Limited contains the necessary exit clauses to avoid penalties if the council decides to terminate the agreement? And am I correct to understand that the sum of the 3-year period also covers the optional further year, as there is nothing suggesting in the report for the further optional year?
Councillor Coles will have the details on that. It's a contract.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. I can't give you the full detail as you are, so I'll come back to you. But what we're doing is changing the relationship of the contract from one of being MSP Plus to MF. So it's a slightly different way of doing business with this particular company. We're not completely ending that business, but in fact we're looking at 3 different ways to make that work. So I don't think I can go into any further detail than that at this moment, but there are a whole number of other bits of IT that this particular programme will bring us, including HR and payroll functions and so on, but we've got to negotiate all of those as we go on.
Okay, thank you. So are there any more questions on 67? In which case we move to page 68. No question on 68. Page 69. Councillor Heather Skipstead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question about the acquisition of homes. I see that they've approved the acquisition of 25 houses for the refugee resettlement programme. My question was, is this ring-fenced money? Because we have an issue, as we can see by one of the motions tonight, about adaptations for disabled residents. It's a huge problem that we haven't got suitable accommodation for disabled people. And was this a special grant? And if not, can some of it be used towards some of the applications that have been long-standing for citizens who need modified homes? Thank you.
Okay, who wants to do that one?
Councillor Coles again,
Councillor Coles then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Skipstead. Yes, we've got extra money to provide this particular service, particularly for the refugees from Afghanistan and Ukraine, where the funding was desperately needed. So it hasn't had a net impact on our funding. It's all new money to provide this particular service.
Okay, thank you. So any more questions on 69? In which case we move to page 70, which is the record of individual Cabinet Member decisions. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Termination of the Council Agency Workers Contract. Can the concerned Cabinet Member confirm that the termination agreement between Opus People Solutions Limited is not subject to any termination costs? And is the termination of the contract because we do not wish to renew the agreement with Opus People Solutions, because we are looking for a different supplier, or is it an action to make savings? Thank you.
Who's doing that one?
Councillor Coles again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Yes, we're changing the relationship slightly so that we're not just going through one company to provide all of the agency support. We've actually got different solutions in place, and that will provide a certain level of savings. You're quite right.
Thank you. So any more on page 70? In case we move to page 71, and we've got Councillor Kayam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask a question about commissioning real-time suicide prevention surveillance system, and I've read around the issue and read around the key decision. Would like to know how the surveillance system will be talking to other key stakeholders for this vulnerable group of people. So, how are we going to be sharing information with CPFT and primary care services who play an important role in those who are deemed to be on the radar when it comes to mental health problems that reach a crisis stage? Thank you.
Is that Councillor Fitzgerald?
It is, but again, this is caught between the changeover period. So what I'm going to do is I think it's all in the paper itself, Councillor Kayyum, but your specific question, which I'll get the officers to pull from the record, I'll get the lead officer to send you a detailed response on that. Okay?
That's why I need you to attend scrutiny, Councillor Fitzgerald.
No, it's, well, to be honest, I was attending a scrutiny meeting at the LGA about the very same thing. About where the funding is coming from, because it ends in March, about our suicide prevention work. So I am across it, but the paper, I think, might have been signed by Councillor Howard.
Can I just make a point, because this came up at the previous meeting where we had several situations where cabinet members weren't able to answer questions. So can I ask that even if the cabinet member has changed, that officers actually ensure that the relevant cabinet member has been briefed, so if members ask a question they can receive an answer to it, but you'll obviously have to respond in writing.
I agree with you entirely, Mr. Mayor, but sometimes, as in the case of the earlier question where Councillor Cole's got about 5 things to answer, it can be quite complex, and rather give out the wrong information, I think it's better that sometimes we are afforded, which is perfectly proper, the right to give that reply in writing rather than give an inaccurate or misleading reply.
You do constitutionally have that right. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of explanation. I wasn't the cabinet member for this decision. Thank you.
I think I'd just like to have put on record the generic point that I've raised, anyway, if officers could brief cabinet members properly. Any more on page 71? Page 72. Right, okay. So we've had the record of executive decisions. So we now move to agenda item 11, which is in relation to the record of combined authority decisions, which were circulated to you in the additional information pack. I'll refer any questions to the relevant combined authority representative, but other than that, the same rules will apply as we had with the previous item. So I'll take each appendix in turn, and if council members could please refer to the title of the individual decision when asking their question. So Appendix 1 is the minutes of the Audit and Governance Committee of the Combined Authority on the 9th of June 2023. Are there any questions on that? Not seeing any questions. Okay, so we then move to Appendix 2, which are the minutes of the Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was held on 19th of June 2023. No questions on that. So Appendix 3, the minutes of the Combined Authority Board meeting on the 31st of May 2023. First of all, we have the actual AGM. So any questions on the minutes of the AGM? Okay, no. So Appendix 4 is the Combined Authority Board meeting on the 31st of May, the actual ordinary meeting which followed on from the AGM. Are there any questions from that? Not seeing any. Okay, that's fine. So we now move to notices of motion, and the first motion is from Councillor Fenner. Councillor Fenner, would you like to move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be happy to. Okay, so the city as we know it has a growing population. This brings with it many challenges, in particular for those families seeking accommodation with a child or dependent who has disabilities and complex needs. This number is also growing. The housing situation in the city is under enormous pressure, with those in need of a medically adapted property finding availability to be extremely limited, with many families struggling in properties which are overcrowded and totally unsuitable. Many of those on the waiting list get bypassed, following a successful bid due to the shortage of suitable properties, even though, confusingly, the description placed in the Jigsaw bidding platform states suitability. We currently have 65 households in Band 1 with an overriding medical need, which requires some sort of level or adaptation. An example of these are as follows, and in no particular order: ceiling track hoist, full lift, through floor lift, fully wheelchair adapted property, ramps, and the list goes on. The City Council and registered housing providers, the Crosskeys Homes, Accent Neen, Longhurst, Minster, etc., and private landlords must come together and look at the needs of these families and ensure that properties advertised are in fact suitable. Those that are not, but have sufficient space required, should also be permitted to have the adaptations made to the properties if required. So my motion is, the Council will resolve to request that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities and relevant officers to urgently engage with all registered housing providers, private landlords and the disability group within the Council to ascertain the best way to create housing for those families, to continue to speak to charitable organisations and affected families to input to determine the specific needs, as each case will be unique, to continue to deliver and maximise the government disabled facility grant allocation through Better Care Fund in order to adapt properties to meet the needs of disabled children and adults across the city. Also, to ensure the families are kept informed throughout the whole process. And finally, to ask housing providers to undertake an audit of their stock in relation to adapted properties to ensure that the Council gives us the best possible opportunity to match clients to properties and to increase the amount of suitability adapted properties available, and request that housing providers provide an annual update. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Tyler, would you like to second the motion and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later on?
I'm very happy to support the motion and I'll reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogg, I understand that you have a procedural motion in relation to this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Just to give a bit of preamble before I move on to the procedural thing, essentially everything that's written here I think is something that we should be doing. And I am a little shocked that certainly a Conservative member feels that this needs to be brought to full council, because the Cabinet member should be doing these things already. And therefore, I wish to move a procedural motion without notice that this is referred to the Scrutiny Committee, the relevant Scrutiny Committee, so the Cabinet member can be properly scrutinised to make sure that these items, one by one, are being achieved as quickly as, if they're not already being achieved, that they are achieved as quickly as possible. So that is essentially what the motion that I want to put forward, is so that it goes directly to scrutiny as a matter of urgency.
Right, thank you. So the procedural motion has been moved, so we now have a debate on the procedural motion. So can I ask you, who wishes to second the procedural motion? Councillor Jamil, I think, was first, but yeah. So Councillor Jamil, would you like to speak immediately or reserve your right to speak later on?
I will second the motion and I will reserve my right, because I believe that there is a lot of sense in what is being proposed.
Okay, so I've also seen Councillor Wiggins, so would you now like to speak on the procedural motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was happy to second the motion, but Councillor Jamil beat me to it. Echo everything Councillor Hogg has said, that this administration has been in power for over 20 years, so if they haven't sorted out the housing problems by now, I really worry about why their own members are raising those issues in full council. It's very helpful for us as an opposition. Give us something to put on our leaflets that the Conservatives criticising their own administration. But seriously, we have a housing waiting list that is far too big. I know we've appointed new officers in housing to get to the bottom of the problems we've got, but there really is a serious problem with housing availability, as Councillor Fenner has detailed, and it doesn't just extend to disabled housing, disabled friendly housing, it's family friendly housing as well. We've got a housing crisis in the city and we need to get it sorted. So I endorse Councillor Hogg's proposal.
Right, okay. Bear in mind we're speaking on the procedural motion, so we've got Councillor John Fox and Councillor Rowlsey, so I'll take Councillor John Fox first.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I didn't actually put my hand up to speak.
Oh, sorry.
I've been waving somewhere, but I will speak.
Okay.
I will fully support this, what Councillor Hogg has said. I think he's completely right in what he's saying, and I will definitely be supporting it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogg. So we now have Councillor Rowlsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say that I think what Councillor Hogg has proposed is eminently sensible. Having had to deal with 70 forced evictions from MOD houses in Wittering and got next to no help from the administration and the Cabinet for it, I think this is very sensible.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the procedural motion? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Mr. Mayor, in the interest of transparency, of course I'm not going to object to this. The fact is that what Councillor Fenner is trying to do is not pressure upon the council, it's pressure on others where we don't perhaps have control of what they do and the way they run their businesses and the way they conduct themselves, because they don't answer to us. But I think it's about redoubling our efforts from an officer perspective, that in terms of the housing team, which we're trying to strengthen. So I say to my team, fine, let's do that. When nobody's here to, make things worse, we're all trying to make things better. And I would remind opposition members of that as well, that we are all collectively trying to make things better. If there's a consensus that it needs to go to scrutiny, send it to scrutiny, Mr. Mayor. I'm fine with that. I think Councillor Fenner might want to either agree or have a word. I'm sure he'll be happy as well. It's his motion.
Would you like to speak, Councillor Fenner?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, yeah. I say I concur with what Councillor Hogg said. It brings it all out into the public, and say for the sake of transparency, and say this side of the chamber, we're all about transparency. So I have no problems with going to scrutiny.
Councillor Marco Soresti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Everything I've heard is, I think, nearly reasonable. To assume that any group, whether Conservative, Labour or otherwise, could have solved the housing crisis in this city is a little bit juvenile to think that, I'm afraid, Mr. Mayor. Let's be perfectly honest. If we're talking about solving the housing issues in the city, most of those things, as indicated in the motion, are being done. One can always do better, but the biggest problem, quite frankly, is finance. If the council wants to take the risk and vote through an extra 20, 25, 30 million, we could probably solve most of those issues within 2 or 3 months. But if somebody wants to do that, would they care to tell me where we're going to get the 20 or 30 or 40 million pounds from to meet the needs of this city? Because at the moment we can't do it. We try to do our best working together with, as it says here, disability groups, private landlords, housing associations, because on our own it is impossible to save things as they are without really huge amounts of capital being injected into the system. And I would also like to say that at the moment we need to do something about the government's attitude towards local housing allowance. And we need to do something about getting that sorted, and it's a shame that's not included in the motion. And I must admit, I should have spoken to Councillor Fenner to do that. But I think we also ought to write to the government to review their local housing allowance for Peterborough, because it's not the same all around the city, all around the country. It's Peterborough that is particularly low, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Can I just remind members we are discussing the procedural motion of whether to refer this to the Growth and Resources Committee. So I've got a couple of other speakers. Councillor Amjad Iqbal wishes to speak, and then I've got Councillor Allen. So
thank you, Mr Mayor. I was minded to go against this procedural motion, but when this side of the chamber, especially the leader, talks about transparency, that thing has convinced me to go in support of it. So thank you very much for that.
Good to see that members are listening to the debate as it happens then. So, Councillor Allen, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy for the matter to go to scrutiny. I think the word transparency is clear, that we need to keep the opposition happy. There's a bit of politicking going on here, without a doubt. The original motion I'm very supportive of, and I spoke to Councillor Fenner. The motion, which I trust will go through, will then be engaged with the housing officers. We have a great team there who are very concerned, and I find them very supportive to me as Cabinet Member for Housing. I've just reacquired that portfolio because it was with Councillor Sereste until quite recently, so that's why he is speaking eloquently. But I think the politicking that I'm hearing, certainly allegations that no help was given with certain housing issues in certain wards, is unfair and unreasonable. I certainly helped a lot on that particular issue, and I think that the housing team...
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Elsey.
Replying to a couple of emails is not giving any help. The 70 families still faced eviction at the beginning and at the end, and nothing was done in between.
Councillor Elsey, that's not a point of order. It doesn't relate to the standing orders. Can you continue, Councillor Allen?
Yes, well, I won't go on further because, again, Councillor over on the opposition side is Councillor Elsey is being somewhat disingenuous because he knows that we spoke at length about the issue as well as several emails. It was the provider, the owner of the housing that was the problem, not our housing team nor myself as the portfolio holder. So well, let's move on. So I'm happy to go to scrutiny, and I'm indeed waiting for the motion, the original substantive motion, to come before us, which we can support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we've now got Councillor Ryland Ray who wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The opposition have stated that they could have done better, and yet it has taken for us to bring this to council for it to be discussed. As a procedural motion, I feel this is probably the biggest and best public forum for things to be scrutinised and debated here in full council, with all members present and able to contribute, as it affects all of our wards individually. But we can delay and we can send it to scrutiny to ensure that it receives the attention that it should in its own setting. Key things to note, and if members wish to add them to their newsletters, they're welcome to do so. But within the motion, we've put about continuing to speak to charitable organisations and affected families, continuing to deliver and maximising the government disabled facility grant allocation, and to continue doing a number of the things that we are doing. So I think the leader summed it up nicely, that this is to double down on our efforts, to appreciate that there have been shortfallings, and to try and get all of the heads back around the table so that we can proceed and we can do best by our residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other people wanting to speak, in which case I'll go back to Councillor Jamil, who reserved his right to speak on the procedural motion.
I'm hearing agreed, so I will stop. The only thing I will say is these words, continue, continue, continue. We've been doing this 23 years of considered mediation, and we're here today. So therefore, as we seem to be all in alliance here on this motion that it should be sent back to scrutiny, I will move on.
Okay. Councillor Hogg, do you want to exercise your right of reply on the procedural motion?
Yeah, just to provide maybe a little bit more explanation of the gist of my motion. Was, as Councillor Ray has said, there's a lot of continues here, and let's strip out the stuff that we're already doing, and let's look at the things that we're not currently doing, and let's make sure that they are getting done, or we can start to do them. So that's the whole idea of using the scrutiny function to be able to look at this. We can strip it away and look at it more closely, and more importantly, have cross-party support to get this thing done. Thank you.
Thank you. So is the proposal to refer it to the Scrutiny Committee agreed? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. So it is now referred to the Scrutiny Committee, and we don't need to have any further debate on it, although the Scrutiny Committee might decide to refer it back at some point. But okay, so we now move to motion number 2 from Councillor Asif. So, Councillor Asif, could I ask you to move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to propose a motion against fly tipping, which is a persistent issue not only in my ward but throughout the city of Peterborough. Fly tipping poses significant environmental and public health risks, as well as impacting the beauty and cleanliness of our cherished public spaces. Therefore, I would like to request Council to instruct the Leader of the Council to write to the MPs calling for legislation or policy change to make fly tipping a more serious offence and to give Council more powers to take actions against fly tippers. I would also like the Council to request the Cabinet Member for Infrastructure, Environment and Climate Change to consider options to increase the number of successful prosecutions for fly tippers, commits to more transparency around efforts to tackle fly tipping, including detail on the results of prosecution and sharing information with the public about enforcement, and clear up activities within relevant Cabinet Member portfolio report to scrutiny. Publication of the names of those successfully prosecuted. This will act as a deterrent and discourage potential offenders from engaging in this illegal activity. Lastly, complete data analysis related to fly tipping incidents, including locations and types of waste. This could help identify hotspots for fly tipping and targeted enforcement action. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Khan, would you like to second the motion and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to second the motion, and I'd like to reserve my right to speak later.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Hogg wishes to speak. Councillor Iqbal wishes to speak. Anyone else want to speak in the debate? Councillor Qayyum. Okay. Right, so we now move to Councillor Hogg then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure that many of the members here, and certainly not maybe so much Councillor Asif, who's a new member, a couple of years ago we had a cross-party task and finish group that looked at fly tipping, excellently chaired by our Deputy Mayor, and there were a number of recommendations that were in that report. I think it might be useful for the Cabinet Member to maybe revisit that report and look at some of the items, the suggestions that were made by that committee, and look at maybe the ones that didn't come forward, maybe having another look at them and seeing if it is now felt that they should be relevant so that we could tackle this scourge that goes across all the wards in the city. I think there's really no ward that doesn't have fly tipping in some shape or form, although in different forms, rural to urban. So we're more than happy to support this. But I do want to bring that to the fore. That there was a lot of work done by that task and finish group, and it would be a shame if we tried to get somebody to have a look at when there is a lot of information that already there to be had. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Amjad Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Asif for his first motion to the Chamber. Now, Mr. Mayor, looking at paragraph 1 of the motion, it's asking the Leader of the Council to write to the MPs calling for legislation, policy, which makes fly tipping a serious offence and gives the Council more powers. Now, the real question that I would like to put to the members here, do we require a motion requesting MPs to make representations when the mover of the motion is a Conservative councillor, the local administration is Conservative, the MPs are Conservatives, and the government is also Conservative? Can we not write to our MPs in our own personal capacity as councillors? Fly tipping is illegal. Fly tipping makes our city look ugly and run down and has wide economic, social and environmental impacts. The real question is, what powers does the council have in dealing with fly tipping, what procedures they have in place, implementing them, and how effective they are? The council's website contains guidance as to how to report fly tipping, has prosecution powers, issuing fixed penalty notices, and the courts can impose more serious action such as imprisonment, substantial fines of up to 50,000, orders to pay costs, and orders to deprive rights to a vehicle used to commit the offence. My expectation was that we will be provided with the data to make a strong business case for lobbying purposes. The motion lacks substance. Nothing has been suggested as an alternative as to why we could not reintroduce the free bulky waste scheme, the community bulky waste schemes. When these schemes were operational, there was a considerable decline in fly tipping in my central ward. The motion talks about increased use of CCTV cameras. The question is, who will be funding the CCTV cameras and meeting their day-to-day costs? The only way the CCTV cameras could be implemented is we could be awarded grants from the government again. It's an ask from a Conservative government. In essence, the mover of the motion is criticising his administration for failing to form a strategy in dealing with the fly tipping issue, but at the same time is trying to protect them by calling for legislation policy which makes fly tipping a serious offence. I will be supporting the motion, but these are my reservations about the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. We've now got Councillor Kayyum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Asif on bringing this motion. It's not easy with your first motion, as I experienced a couple of years ago as well, but well done for bringing it to the fore. I'd just like to raise a few points, if I may. One is, I think Councillor Iqbal has alluded to the majority of it, but I thought that we had a structure around motions where those motions that were going to have major implications, a cost over £100,000, would then be sort of treated as such. It seems that this has just been streamlined through. We were quoted that the cost of a CCTV camera would equate to, with installation, etc., the proper CCTV camera is £70,000. So that's one point that I'd just like to make in future when we're looking at motions coming to full council. And again, Councillor Iqbal has alluded to quite a few of the points that I wanted to detail. The other thing I'd like to say is that there's no mention of, when we talk about legislation and policy and treating this as sort of, a crime, it's very easy to collaborate with the police and crime commissioner on such issues too. So that's the other point I'd just like to make. And the third point I'd like to make is in clause B, point 3, clause B states publication of the names of those successfully prosecuted. And we are privy to the names of those that are successfully prosecuted because we have information on Peterborough City Council's website that was published on the 8th of February 2023 that actually gives the names of those individuals that were prosecuted and awarded very heavy fines. So I'd just like to make those points, but we will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Right, okay, does anybody else want to speak on it? Councillor Fitzgerald and then Councillor Hammerine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too welcome the motion from our newest members that shows they're keen to get stuck in. And yes, they may be lacking in some history or background, and it's great that senior members can point out where they might look. But I would just, for Councillor Kayyum's benefit, I think the £70,000 is talking about fixed cameras. The covert mobile cameras, I think that's probably what's missing from that explanation, that they move around hotspots, and they're used covertly for that very reason, where people tend to dump stuff. So I think there's a slight difference. What I would say, and we may not have done it for a while, what it's asking is if the council, whether it's through me or the council writes to, the council writing to people adds more weight. And what I've consistently said in the press and others, we need a change in the law. That's what's needed. We all know that, but we need to reinforce that from time to time. So I'm happy, whether it's me or whether it's in our collective name as the council, to write to government to say that they need to change the law. Because frankly, every time we take people to court, it costs us more than we get back in the fine. So typically they get a £400 fine, it costs us £2,000 to take them to court. So that's normal fly tipping. What Councillor Iqbal was referring to, the bigger numbers, are generally those commercial waste fines where you can go to prison and get fined £50,000. That doesn't happen to Mrs. Miggins, as Councillor Hiller might call her, on Star Road or wherever, that dumps a sofa. You get a slap on the wrist or a small fine. But we're losing money hand over fist. So until there's a change in the law, it's very difficult for us to prosecute people or justify doing so, but we do have to remain vigilant. And if this council can add pressure through its MPs or through ever to get a change in the law, then that's why we should support this. And I applaud the members for bringing it back to the forefront today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we've got a list of speakers now. We've got Councillor Hemraj, Councillor Ray and Councillor Howard. So we'll take Councillor Hemraj first.
Thank you for the motion. I'd just like to point out that on Friday the 7th of July, the Environment Minister Rebecca Powell announced delivering on the Prime Minister's action plan to clamp down on these crimes and build stronger communities. And that's off from Monday the 10th of July, the increase of FPM fines. Thank you, that's all I need to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for raising that Conservative announcement for us. Whilst this motion is from a Conservative member asking a Conservative administration to write to a Conservative MP requesting legislation from a Conservative government, this is a great opportunity, as the leader said, to get the weight of all parties by making it a full council request rather than an individual. And if successful, I think we'll have to make sure that we don't put a big Conservative logo on it, but a Peterborough City Council logo instead, because it's all of us that are going to hopefully get behind this motion. We've all noted that this affects all of our wards, and I'd be keen to see this go further, especially with legislation changes. But in particular with what we currently have within legislation, prosecutions are public information, and the local police name and shame offenders on social media. I think we should be doing the same to provide a true deterrent for people, because that may be the thing that tries to stop people, that embarrassment of being called out for committing these crimes. As Councillor Quayam said, this is information that's online, but a number of us have tried to navigate our council website, and that's trying to find certain information, whereas actually I think putting it out there on the forefront and making it as public as possible would be great. But once again, I want to add my congratulations for this motion. It's something that I think everyone should be able to get behind, and as a first motion, hopefully it's a successful one. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Howard.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I like the motion, and I think one thing I'd like to see with the motion is that it's almost an ongoing conversation rather than a one-hit motion. So rather than one letter to the MP, I mean, let's face it, one of our MPs isn't particularly shy on sending letters, so I'm sure he won't mind a few letters going back his way. So, you know, the way I see it, it should be an ongoing dialogue rather than a one-hit letter to the MP. Let's keep this conversation going until we actually get a solution. You know, governments change, authorities change. It has to keep on going until we get this right.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Not seeing any other speakers. Councillor Alsey, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. In the interest of being independent, I actually support this motion, and I sympathise with the portfolio holder, because I had this portfolio for a number of years, and it's a thankless task, because they are actually quite right, in as much as however hard you try to bring people to court, the magistrates who err on the side of caution, shall I say, will means test people and will give them a slap on the wrist, and they'll walk away with a fine which is less than it cost them to get us to take the aforementioned items away in the first place. So it is a thankless task. We do actually have covert cameras, and we have used them because they were bought whilst it was still my portfolio, so I don't know where they are, but they should be actioned. I support the motion in as much as we need to continually put pressure on government to change the law, because unless the law changes, unless it becomes so unviable for people to fly tip to the extent that they potentially will lose their car or they potentially will lose their house as a consequence of fly tipping, you're never going to solve it. Because no matter what initiatives, and I do sympathise with the administration here because I've done it, no matter what initiatives you bring out, whether it's free bulky waste collections or whether it's community tips, what you find is that the slots for the free bulky waste collections are filled up by people who would ordinarily have paid for a slot, and therefore all you're doing is losing the revenue from their paid pickups, and the people who will flight it will continue to do so. So I do support the motion, I do sympathise on this point, and we need to put as much pressure on the government going forward to change the law. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? No. In that case, to go back to Councillor Khan, you reserved your right to speak. So would you like to speak at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think everybody's in support, so I've got nothing to say.
And Councillor Asif, would you like to say any words in summation?
Not anymore, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is that motion agreed then? Agreed, thank you. Right. Good. So, I'm proposing that we should take a short break at 8 o'clock, but I think we've got time to possibly do motion 3. So, in that case, I would like to ask Councillor Hussain, would you like to move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the motion, the concept of 15-minute cities has been brought forward by some councils, namely Oxford, Sheffield, Bristol and Canterbury. Low emission zones have also been implemented in a number of cities across the UK, as well as some congestion charge schemes. A 15-minute city is a concept that all your daily needs are within 15 minutes of where you live. Therefore, there is no need to travel any further. 15-minute cities, as well as low-emission zones and congestion charge schemes, penalise motorists unnecessarily and are not necessary to introduce in Peterborough. They take away social freedoms, expecting someone to travel further than 15 minutes of their home or charging them extra to drive through city centres. As seen during the COVID lockdowns, when we restricted people socially, it can affect their mental health. And 15-minute cities that restrict vehicle movement run the risk of doing this too. We are of course committed to promoting walking and cycling and offering EV charging to reduce our carbon footprint, and will continue to promote the green credentials of our city. We cannot realistically achieve that by constantly penalising drivers and attacking their freedom of choice and movement. We are a city surrounded by villages, market towns and agriculture. The network with those close neighbours is paramount to the economic, employment and social landscape of our city. A congestion charge zone and 15-minute city that restricts vehicle movements would deter vital resources those neighbours offer. The sharp increase in online sales has seen retail in city centres decline, with retailers moving to retail parks away from congestion charge zones. Vehicle manufacturers and design is now centred around producing vehicles with very low or zero emissions. There is a staggering surge in electric and hybrid vehicles that, along with current economic climate where people are not making journeys unless there is a need, means we do not need to police or control people's journeys. If we want to ensure a vibrant city centre which is welcoming to all, then we must not allow Peterborough to become a 15-minute city that restricts vehicle movement. The motion formally notes its the city formally notes its rejection of 15-minute cities that restrict vehicle movements, along with any notion of introducing a low emission zone or congestion charges in Peterborough. It has to protect residents' freedoms and their mental health by committing to not introduce any restrictive types of 15-minute city, low emissions zones or congestion charge schemes in Peterborough, and recognise that there are other more productive ways to reduce CO2 levels, and Peterborough already has a good track record when it comes to green policies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Fitzgerald, will you second the motion and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Yes, I will, Mr. Mayor, and I'll reserve my right. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Hogg and Councillor Wiggin wish to speak, and Councillor Kayoum. So we'll go in that order. Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect, Councillor, I feel that you need to put your tinfoil away. This is up there with 5G masts are looking into our thoughts, and the vaccine that saved the country was there to control us and put tracking things in there. These 15-minute cities, it's a new badge on an old concept. So old, in fact, that it strikes at the heart of Peterborough. The Development Corporation has essentially, at the heart of what they were doing was to establish the townships. The townships are your 15-minute cities. The idea is that you have the ability to be able to walk to your surgery. You have the ability to walk to shops to buy food, so that you're not forced into it. It's the opposite of what you're saying. It's not about forcing people out of cars. It's about giving people the opportunity not to use their cars because they can walk to these services. It's not about restricting people. It's about freeing them up. So, it's almost like it's been turned on your head. I'm not sure where you're getting your your media outlet from, either GB News or from the Daily Mail or what have you. But this is just scaremongering at an epic proportion. The 15-minute cities are about giving people change, and the fact that you're talking about the low emission zones. The Cabinet met on the 14th of November for the local energy plan, and it states here that a low emission zone could help accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. So we as a council have already signed up for this. The Cabinet has signed up for low emission zones. So I just really think that that this is it's baseless, is the point. We can't support it because essentially what it is doing is getting in the way of good policy where people can have the ability to go to in their local area to get the things that they need to do without having to travel far afield. And if we were to try and look at this in the way that this has been worded, it is essentially making people scared of this initiative, and it's a really great initiative. So I cannot support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Chris Wiggin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hogg has actually stolen some of my speech, so next time I won't give him advance view. However, it does seem like he's made the case that the Conservatives are finding something else to put in Councillor Ray's newsletter. My experience of living in Peterborough is that it does not stop people driving. I came in on the bus to this meeting and I thought I wouldn't make it on time because I was stuck in my group leader's ward coming down London Road because there were so many cars. No one has said cars will be banned. The only people suggesting that are the people who are speaking out against 15-minute cities because they don't want people to stop them driving. But in this council we haven't suggested that. There will not be a congestion charge in Peterborough. The leader has been very clear on that in negotiations with the combined authority. We don't need to pass policy to agree with the leader's public statements unless the mover of the motion doesn't trust his leader to follow through. There were rumours that the Liberal Democrats supported this congestion charge, but these rumours originated from the Conservative Party's election campaign, and I can confirm the Liberal Democrats do not support congestion charging in Peterborough. Encouraging people to walk or cycle rather than drive has been part of this council's plans for some time. I've been in many meetings discussing improving cycling and walking infrastructure, both urban and rural. The evidence suggests reduced car use means less air pollution and increased physical activity, contributing to increased mental and physical health, the opposite to what is claimed in the motion. The Liberal Democrat group will not be supporting this motion, as Councillor Hogg has outlined. And we believe in policy based on evidence, not scaremongering, and we support the work the Council is already doing on transforming travel in Peterborough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wiggin. We've now got Councillor Kayum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to point out, I'd like to ask actually Councillor Hussain to substantiate evidence-wise what data he has regarding people's mental health becoming impacted as a result of 15-minute cities. So if he's got any substantive data in his sum up, I'd like him to give us some details on what data he has within other authorities that are 15-minute cities say it's actually impacted on mental health, the data behind that. And also, I find it quite ironic that when we look at the clause in this motion that says that there are more productive ways to reduce CO2 levels, actually, within the local plan on page number 9, where we look at sustainable transport, it says to encourage walking, cycling, and reduce the need to travel by car. So it's contrary to what the administration has set out in its local plan. Also, under the health and well-being clause of the local plan, it stipulates that access to health provision, health amenities, good local fruit and vegetables, and healthy, areas that will provide healthy eating will be within a short distance of residents. So, I mean, I think sometimes when I look at some of these motions, it looks very under-researched. So I'd like, if you can give some evidence, but that would be great for our own learning more than anything else upon reflection. But it's for these reasons that the Labour Group won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kine. We now have Councillor Andy Coles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this motion, and the issues, I think, been very well illustrated by members opposite. Councillor Hogg is absolutely right that the design, the Development Corporation, was to produce exactly what he said, which was local communities surrounded by industry, so that you could live, work, and buy everything that you might want in that local area. One small problem with that is that people don't live like that anymore, and we don't have that sort of connectivity currently in those particular areas. So we have out-of-town shopping centres, and we have the shopping centres in the centre of town. And we also have incredible challenges on retail, where the whole retail experience has changed, where we are expecting delivery drivers to bring our goods to our homes. It was at a very interesting meeting last week at Anglia Ruskin University, where they were talking about how things might develop in the future. And what I found very interesting was there's one particular area in Peterborough that has probably the highest level of home working in the area at 45%. It was an extraordinary figure. And that was in the Hamptons, if I remember right. That's Dunblane Drive. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, I do remember now. And what's happened there is that people are working in their own particular area as home workers, but are still not able to access all the services that they might particularly want because they are home working in that particular area. So that whole area around Dunblane Drive does need a whole level of infrastructure if you're going to bring about a localised structure like that. So we have to be a bit careful about what we can deliver in this city, considering that we started off with a hub and spoke system with local communities, heavy industry, all of which is gone. The sort of work that's being delivered now, 50% is by people who are in the professions who are working from home. The other 50% is by people in trades who are not working from home and have to travel. And if you try to get around with a van with all of the equipment inside it, well, you can't have an electric van because it's not powerful enough. You can't take a ladder on the bus. So you're going to have to make sure that people can travel around the area and not be penalised if they're in a trade and trying to deliver goods around the whole area, working across Peterborough, all told. We have a very strong sense of community in Peterborough. The 50-minute city plan is to engender what we already have, which are really good communities that surround us. In terms of better health and well-being, what we have proposed, if it can be done, is for the city centre to become pedestrianised if we can do it, and if we can have cycle and so on, which is an ideal thing to do because the centre of the city has changed. It's no longer a place where you travel in for all your retail needs because, as I've said before, they're either delivered or they're in outside parks that you have to drive to collect your goods. So we have to be very careful about what we're asking when we talk about the 50-minute cities. I have read about it. I do understand it. I don't think it's appropriate for this city because it was designed around the car and around the parkways. And how it's developed is that all of the out-of-town stuff means you need to drive around there, and so you can't do it in a 50-minute journey. That's why I'm supporting this particular motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Wow, that was amazingly bang on 3 minutes. That's phenomenal. Okay, so we've now got, just looking at the list, which has just been updated as I speak. So we've got Councillor Tyler, Councillor Ray, Councillor Howard and Councillor Suresti. What the plan is, we'll complete the debate on this motion and then we'll have the break. So we now go to Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to know who's going to qualify what is a 15-minute city, because it'd probably take me 15 weeks to get 15 minutes for somebody else. So who would be the person responsible for making those judgments? Thank you.
Okay, that's a question that somebody may wish to answer later on in the discussion. So we now have Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with an interesting point. I actually agree with a number of opposition members that have spoken, but the thing is, so does this motion. If you look at what it resolves to do, it specifically says to note the rejection of 15-minute cities that restrict vehicle movements. So that restrictive type where we're saying that you have to stay within 15 minutes is what we are against. And we're putting that on the record to say that that is not something that we want, and it's not something that would be of the benefit to our residents. And that seems to be what you said as well, yet you don't want to back the motion. Protect residents' freedoms and their mental health by not introducing a restrictive 15-minute city, low emission zone or congestion charge scheme. Now, I know a number of people it would impact their mental health if they were charged to drive into the city centre to meet up with a friend or to go for a meal or to do something that they wanted to do. To me, that seems common sense. So everything that the opposition said kind of seems right, but that's what the motion says. We don't want a restrictive 15-minute city type. It's very specific in the wording there. And we are committing that we do not want congestion charging. Now, other members don't seem to want to support that. They don't want to back that, which leaves it open to our residents being impacted by this in the future. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I've been privileged to sit in a few meetings with highways officers and know that there is some really, really exciting and dynamic options that may come forward over the next few years. Please goodness if funding allows. So in my mind, what we should be focusing on, and I believe we are all focused on, is quality of choice. The more choice you give people, the less chance there is of all these restrictions happening. And I feel like all this motion is probably doing is tying officers down to a point that officers can't have a free and open conversation with policy makers, with choices for the administration to make that may have to be part of these dynamic decisions in the future. I think the motion is trying to get everyone into a rabbit hole, which is unfair, because I know already there is some really good stuff going on behind the scenes, and what we can't do is restrict officers to not have the freedom to discuss some really exciting options that may have to come along in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marcos Shorasti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion because, for lots of reasons, and if I may, I'll outline a few. I have the honour and privilege of being one of the councillors in Hampton Vale. And if you look at the records and the history of Hampton Vale was probably built to be a 15-minute city in the terms that we understand what people are trying to do elsewhere. Does it work? Have you tried to get into Hampton Vale of an evening about 5 o'clock? Take you 15 minutes to get from the flyover to that goes into the Ortons, Orton Goldhay and Serpentine Green. It take you 15 minutes just to do that bit, and that's only about 300 yards. Never mind 15 minutes to get from Hampton Vale into Peterborough. So, number one, where we've got something similar in our city, it clearly does not work. One of the biggest issues as well is that what people think, oh, this is a 15-minute city, we'll make sure people use their cars less. It's rubbish. The public will want to use their cars. And again, I invite you to come into Hampton Vale and see the consequences of planning for not using cars and forgetting that people will be people and they will use their cars. Ask our emergency services or Aragon how many times they have to go back into Hampton Vale to collect bins because there's parked all down one side and the streets are so narrow the bins can't get down. What if your house is burning down and you've got a child? Anyway, I paint a picture because I think we've got this 15-minute idea in our city. It does not work. Number two, Peterborough is the second fastest growing city in the country. And the reason it's the fastest growing city in the country is not just the economy, that's because we build houses. And house building is 40% of our economy. So are we going to say we're going to stop construction traffic? Any construction vehicle that takes more than 15 minutes to get from A to B is not going to be allowed. What are we going to do? Stop building? I mean, it's complete nonsense, Mr. Mayor. Let's just think about this carefully before we do something silly. And lastly, the improvement panel has said that we, to become a proper sustainable city, which we will, because as a council we've done some fantastic things, and I'd like to say our administration has made a huge contribution to where we are today with our officers and everybody else. The one thing they have said is the one way that we can become a sustainable city is to grow. Full stop. If we stop that growth, we're dead. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Harper will put you on the list. We've got Councillor Jamil, Councillor Tholborn, and then Councillor Harper. So, Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, when I first looked at this motion, it looks like it's an opposition group trying to stop the administration from setting up these 15-minute cities, which I've not heard anything, and I don't think we're proposing to go down a congestion charge or any of the other things that are suggested there. And I agree with Councillor Howard. You know, we are tying ourselves down in such a way where if we are able to then get to a stage where we need to look at it holistically, we're not going to be able to because we've put these restrictions on us. This motion, I think, is very ill thought out. The design of Peterborough with our brilliant ring road that runs through the centre allows us things that are not available in Oxford or Sheffield or Brindlestone or Canterbury. So it's irrelevant for us in Peterborough. So I am opposing this motion today simply because I don't want to be in a position where our brilliant officers are not able to have everything at their disposal simply because some member put forward a motion that may happen, may not happen, is relevant, isn't relevant. So for that reason, I will be opposing this motion.
Okay, Councillor Tholborn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Short and sweet, hopefully. I oppose this motion on the basis of the serious issue we've got around climate change. Do not take the tools off the table before you know what tools you need. That's my first point. But to solve the climate issue, there's only one way, and that's via opportunity. And if you start banning things, opportunity dries up. So on either side, forcing people to do one thing or another is not how this is going to be resolved. The only way you're going to resolve it is creating opportunity. And all I can see, if we leave the pitch nice and clear and open, is opportunity after opportunity. And if you start banning things, you'll be banning opportunity. You talk about growth. The growth that I can see through the opportunity of solving climate change is huge. Huge for this city, huge for every individual I see in this city. So don't ban it. Keep the pitch open, and then we will create opportunity and solve the problem. So I will oppose this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Tholborn. Now move to Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's all about encouragement. I wouldn't support a congestion charge. I wouldn't support a parking at work tax. I wouldn't support higher car parking fees in the city centre. But it doesn't appear the opposition are actually proposing that. We need to encourage a reduction in the use of the private vehicles. There's no doubt about that. But if we're going to reduce, the alternative must be fit for purpose. If we're going to use public transport, it needs to be fit for purpose. It simply isn't in this city. Who wouldn't go on a bus that was clean, was reliable, was safe, was cost effective? Most people probably would. Electric vehicles, out of most people's reach. What's the point in even bringing that in? If the government want us to go that way, they're going to have to subsidise heavily. As I said about the buses, reliable. Walking, cycling. On our green wheel, it's in a hell of a state. It needs a lot of investment. So if we're going to encourage people to walk, we're going to people to ride, we need to put some investment into those surfaces. They're dangerous. Unfortunately, I will be voting against the motion. It just doesn't have enough substance. It rather seeks to ban something when that's not what's on the table. Nobody on this side of the House appears to be saying they want to bring in 15-minute cities. And as Councillor Hogg has said, the leader has already said, and we've all agreed, that we don't want that anyway. So I don't see why it needs to have a motion to now ban what we've already said none of us want. It seems a pointless motion, so I'll vote against it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to speak in the debate? In which case we go to Councillor Fitzgerald, who seconded and reserved his right to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think a lot of members don't understand what's going on in terms of ULEZ, what happened in Cambridge City and the vote. The public feel very strongly about this, and fine, support, don't support. I know where I am, but look, this is about the 15-minute cities concept already exists. So if you took those words out of this motion, it's about this council not wishing to restrict the motorists and their choice to use their cars. I'm all for encouraging more walking and cycling, and Councillor Harper's right about buses, but frankly they're not fit for purpose, so you can't rely on public transport. We're very much reliant on cars. And if you go, what's happened is with this concept, it's been hijacked to the extreme where if you live one side of the city, you can only travel to the other side of the city so many times a year, and if you don't, you get charged for it. People may just look at the research. And fine, if you don't want to support that, then come out with what your position is in terms of whether it's congestion charging, workplace charging, any charging you like. I'm not for those particular things, and I've made that clear. And I don't think Councillor Harper just said the very same thing. So if you take out, we're rejecting restrictive vehicle movements, forget 15-minute cities, and we don't want to introduce congestion charging, so it could have been perhaps worded better, and not to introduce any schemes that restrict or penalise motorists, and at the same time do all the good things. So in essence, that to me is what it's about. It's not about anything else, it's about those things. And that's why I'll vote for it. It could have been perhaps worded better, or some people would have understood. But the public are clearly against the Labour policy of the London Mayor, in droves and thousands. They're clearly against it in Cambridge, and there will be a political sea change in Cambridge. Trust me, there will. When and if that comes forward as a policy. So I'm just going to vote for it, because I think all it's committing us to do is to keep freedom of choice. It's not restricting choice, particularly for motorists and others, to go about the business how they want to without fear of getting penalised for it as a car driver. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We do need to vote on the motion as it actually is and not as it may have supposed to have been. But I'd like to ask Councillor Hussain if you'd like to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a lot of comments there, so I'll try and do the best I can to sum it up as quickly as I can. As the Leader of the Council has said, this isn't, this motion was about protecting people's freedom of choice. Councillor Hogg mentions about the vaccine and 3G masks and all that, and I have no issues with, vaccines or any ideas or notions of 3G masks or what he, sort of tried to allude to. But at the same time, he talks about, and Councillor Howard mentioned about not restricting the administration. But what about the residents and their choices? There's no mention of not restricting residents or their freedom of choice. The Lib Dems are obviously, they talk about congestion charges, but at the same time they're not prepared to vote against it or protect residents from it. They mentioned about low emission zones. We've got walking zones in the city centre which are low emission zones, but you don't drive through them. They're low emission zones. We've got cycleways. Councillor Harper mentioned about the buses. Yes, they're not fit for purpose, but at the same time, then what are people going to do if our public transport isn't up to the level they will use their vehicles? Councillor Jamil mentioned the ring road. Again, yes, it's a ring road, but tomorrow or in a few years' time, there could be congestion charging on there because it becomes busy or attracting people to the city centre. So, I'm disappointed that the opposition are not supporting this motion, but obviously they've made their position clear that they're open to the idea of congestion charging or penalising the public. So,
Mr. Mayor, point of personal explanation. I didn't say anything of the sort. I actually said I was against any type of restrictions, and I believe most of the opposition have agreed to that. So I think that's an unfair statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that point. If you'd like to continue, please.
Well, Councillor Harper, if you're against restrictions, that's what this is saying. We were asking to vote against restrictions, restricting the public. But
sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to come in again. The motion doesn't just say that.
What sort of point are you making?
Points of explanation. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't say that. The motion says effectively the big one in there is to ban 15-minute cities. Nobody's asking for that. So nobody can be said to be supporting it. So Councillor Hussain is wrong to say that.
Councillor Hussain.
I'm happy to move on that motion and go to the vote.
Thank you. I'm fairly sure this motion isn't agreed, so I hand over to Councillor Sainsbury. What type of point have you got?
No, just to say I'd like to request a recorded vote.
Right. Do you need a seconder for your proposal to have a recorded vote?
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Okay. And then what did we do then? Right. So all those members who wish to have a recorded vote need to stand up so we can count them to see whether we've got the required threshold. Yeah, so we have the required threshold to have a recorded vote, so I'll hand over to Pippa Turby to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we are going through a recorded vote, I will read out members' names, and when I read your name, please turn your microphone on and let me know whether you are voting for, against or abstaining. Councillor Ahmed.
For.
Councillor Jackie Allen.
For.
Councillor Steve Allen.
For the motion.
Councillor Asif.
For the motion.
Councillor Barkham.
Against the motion.
Councillor B.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Bond.
Against.
Councillor Sandra Bond.
Against.
Councillor Casey.
For.
Councillor Sereste.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Day.
Against.
Councillor Dowson.
Against.
Councillor Elsie.
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Farouk.
Against.
Councillor Sakib Farouk.
Against.
Councillor Fenner.
For.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yes, for.
Councillor Judy Fox.
Against.
Councillor John Fox.
Against.
Councillor Harper.
Against.
Councillor Hemorrhage.
Against.
Councillor Hiller.
Against.
Councillor Hogg.
Against.
Councillor Howard.
Against.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Jamil.
Against.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Lane.
For.
Councillor Mahmood.
Against.
Councillor Moyo.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
For.
Councillor Over.
For.
Councillor Perkins.
For.
Councillor Kayum.
Against.
Councillor Rangzeb.
For.
Councillor Ray.
For.
Councillor Rush. Councillor Sabir.
Against.
Councillor Sainsbury.
For.
Councillor Sanford.
I am against the motion.
Councillor Sagir.
Against.
Councillor Shahid.
Against, please.
Councillor Sharp. Councillor Simons.
For.
Councillor Skibstead,
Abstain.
Councillor Stevenson,
Against.
Councillor Strangwood,
Against.
Councillor Thurlborn,
Against.
Councillor Tyler,
For.
Councillor Warren,
For.
Councillor Wigan.
Against.
Thank you, Mayors. That's 24 voting in favour, 28 voting against and 1 abstention. Therefore, the motion is defeated.
Thank you. We'll now take a break. It's 8:20, so if I'd ask members to reconvene at 8:35, and the council is adjourned. Thank you. Right, we'll just pause whilst people take their seats, but if people could sit down. So if you'd like to take your seats then please, thank you. Okay, could people sit down please? Councillor Fitzgerald, please. Right. Okay. We now move to motion number 4, which is in the name of Councillor Hussain. So, Councillor Hussain, would you like to move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Prime Minister is setting out clear guidance for schools on how to best support and manage transgender pupils, which includes requiring parental consent to allow students to change their name, pronouns or uniform. It also outlines that schools must inform parents if their child wishes to transition and take a precautionary approach to doing so. The guidance also says that schools can refuse to socially transition children if they believe that doing so may harm the well-being of other children in the school. It states that students who go by different pronouns to that of their biological sex should be banned from competitive school sports in their assigned gender to promote fairness and safety. There is also a review into teaching of relationships, sex and health education, and how this needs to be age appropriate with parents understanding what is being taught in the classroom. Many parents have made representation to me and to fellow councillors from other wards about the lobbying group Stonewall, who many feel does not represent or understand the concerns of parents. Schools should closely follow the guidance set out by the Prime Minister and reject previous advice given to them by Stonewall that fails to mention parents at all. A primary school in Park Ward had over 100 parents demonstrating after the school didn't follow its own guidelines and inform parents about the subject matter in a RSE lesson it had conducted the day before. A similar situation also almost occurred at an academy-run primary school in my ward, where the demonstration was averted after representation was made by parents to me and our MP. And it's one of the reasons I bring this motion before the Council today. We cannot have our schools and nurseries follow guidance such as trans pupils being allowed to choose which bathroom and changing rooms they use. This may put children at risk, especially those in older age groups. Child safeguarding and parental input matters. It is up to parents to decide how they raise their children, and schools must do their best to support them by accepting and upholding this new guidance. Once the review comes out on RSHE's curriculum, we must work with schools to ensure that lessons are age appropriate and parents are kept informed on what their children are learning about in the classroom. We ask the Council to review the national guidance once published with officers of the Council and promote it with schools so that all schools, including academies, are aware of their responsibilities. Schools are encouraged to implement the guidance with the safeguarding of all children at the forefront of their work and ensure that parents and carers are involved and kept informed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Councillor Jamil, what is it? Point of...
It was a point of order, sir, Rule 2013. My understanding is that this guidance that this motion refers to has not been given out. I just want to know the validity of the motion. If the guidance isn't there, we are going to be voting on something that doesn't really exist. So should we be having this debate?
Do you want to respond to that?
It does say once published, Councillor Jamil, in the... Yeah.
So there's no clarity.
I think you do make a point that to promote something when you don't know what it's promoting, but I think, strictly speaking, we've been told the motion is in order. So, So thank you, Councillor Hussain. Points of. Yeah. Can I just say, if people do want to make points of order or point of personal explanation or point of accuracy, if you could hold up your card and when I call you to speak, immediately say what your point is. That would be quite useful. Okay, so I now call upon Councillor Khan would you like to second the motion and either speak or reserve your right to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to speak. I'd like to second the motion and support this because as I've had many concerned parents contact me within my constituency. As Councillor Hussain has said, obviously there was one school in particular in my constituency where over 100 parents turned up to protest against this whilst they weren't aware of what was being taught. This led to many meetings with the governors and teachers and the head teacher, and that was overturned for that school. I mean, parents believe that children are being indoctrinated against religious and social beliefs of the parents and the carers. I believe parents should have the right to know what the children are being taught. Parents should be informed about their rights so they can exercise them if or when they feel appropriate. So parents should have the choice to withdraw from children from school, from such teachings, and should be conveyed to parents from the school. So I support this motion, and I believe this is a first stand in support of giving control or helping the parents and the children. So I hope that all will support this motion.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hock, Councillor Iqbal and Councillor Hamraj and Councillor Wiggin and Councillor Howard. Okay, so we'll take Councillor Hock first then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another extraordinary motion, I have to say. This is the cart before the horse. It's asking us to deliberate on something that doesn't exist yet. It's not been published. I'm trying to work out whether or not a Conservative councillor here is basically saying he doesn't trust the Conservative government to come forward with guidance that is applicable and fit for purpose, and doesn't demonstrate that it puts parents and carers at the heart of that guidance. As far as I'm concerned, fine, bring this back when we know what the guidance is going to be. If you've got problems with the guidance, then we can write to the minister concerned and tell them that they've got it wrong and how they've got it wrong. In terms of being able to sort of talk to schools, whatever our interpretation of that guidance is, actually, in the vast majority of cases, we're looking at academies. The academies get their guidance from their trusts, and the trusts basically look at the guidance and will put that into some sort of policy for the school. Not something that Peterborough City Council would get involved in. Ultimately, because the schools, the trusts, report directly back to the Department of Education. I think this whole thing about the older children being at risk. The vast majority of the schools that I've been to have unisex toilets now. That they have separate stalls, and the washing facilities are open. You can walk straight past and see that they're all opened up. And exactly for that reason, so to safeguard the children, because in the old days you used to have bullying used to happen within these toilets because the door was closed, nobody could see what was going on, and now that with these unisex toilets, now you have separate stalls, and children are able to go to the toilet safely. So I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill here. Let's wait for the guidance to be published. Let's see what it has to say. Let's look to see if it is appropriate that we need to make it needs to be tweaked in some way or not. It may well be that it is actually fit for purpose and that we can go on with our lives and actually deal with things that need to be dealt with. So on that basis, I can't support this motion on the basis that it's asking me to deliberate on something that doesn't actually exist yet.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The starting point, the relevant working authority of this motion is the Prime Minister's guidance for schools. The motion states that the Prime Minister is setting out clear guidance. It does not state that the Prime Minister has set out clear guidance. The motion also refers to what the guidance is saying when the guidance has not been published. In fact, the guidance has been delayed again because of a row in the Cabinet between the Education Secretary and Ministers. Members, this motion is referring to a guidance which is yet to be published. Therefore, this motion is entirely based on speculation and assertions, unless, on the contrary, the mover of the motion can provide evidence to prove otherwise. The motion talks about a review of relationship and sex education. This is a law brought in by the Conservative government in 2017. It became a legal requirement for schools in September 2020, but no clear guidance was given to schools. The motion talks about schools approaching this issue in a different ways, but makes no mention of academisation and how this government has given more power to schools to do things differently. The motion talks about concerns on RSE education at a school. This is a government scheme. It is the government's job to provide guidance, but they haven't. The motion is asking the Cabinet member to review the national guidance once published, with officers. Members, from my point of view and from experience, this is clearly a motion that does not have officers' approval, as I do not see any officers agreeing on a motion which is entirely based on media speculation. The question I would like to put to members when they decide to vote on this motion is, do members agree in officers investing resources and time in a motion which is not even ready to be baked? Labour is clear that parents and carers are the prime educators for children, and that schools complement and reinforce the role supporting the pupils learn at school. We back parents. We welcome national guidance. Teachers have been left with that guidance for years. We believe in protecting the safety and rights of women and girls. We also believe these issues should be dealt with sensitively rather than through megaphone. The fact that guidance has not been published is a failing of the government, not anybody else's. This motion is confusing, lacks clarity, direction, does not make sense, and the guidance is not been published. Therefore, I am minded to abstain on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. We've got Councillor Hamraj, we've got Councillor Wiggin and Councillor Howard. So, Councillor Hamraj first, please.
Thank you, Chair. The government UK website guidance states as it is now, all schools must have a written policy in place for new relationship education and relationships and sex education curriculum. Policies are typically approved by the governing body or the appropriate body if that is not the governing body, for example, the Trust Board. You will need to decide the outline of the curriculum and consult with parents and carers on the policy before finalising it. The statutory guidance suggests typical sections you may wish to include in your policy, such as details of the content or scheme of work and when each topic is taught, taking the age of pupils into account. Who delivers relationship educations or relationships and sex education, whether you're using external organisations to teach part of the curriculum, how the policy has been produced and how it will be kept under review in both cases, working with parents and carers as set out in the advice on engaging parents with relationship education, how the delivery of content will be made for children with special educational needs, an explanation of the right to withdraw pupils from sex education classes, requirement on schools in law, for example, where relevant, the Human Rights Act 1998, the Equality Act 2010 and the Education Act 1996, how often the policy is updated and who approves the policy. Where parents and carers have complaints which cannot be resolved through informal discussions, you should ask them to follow the school curriculum's complaints policy. The public sector equality duty sets out in section 149 of the Equality Act 2010 requires all public authorities, including state-funded schools, in their exercise of their function to have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation and any other conduct that is forbidden by or under the Equality Act. Advance equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. Foster good relations between persons who share a relevant protected characteristics and persons who do not share it. All information is found on the government website. It is worth a read and there's lots of information there. We should wait for the new guidance before giving officers extra work and bring it back to the Children's and Education Scrutiny to discuss the further and the plan for all schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hemraj. Now call upon Councillor Chris Wiggin to contribute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's hard enough being a child. Indeed, Councillor Hogg explained some of the issues that have been faced with bullying in toilets. Fortunately, I didn't get that part of it, but I did get a lot of the other bad things that go through childhood. But I can't imagine how difficult it is to go through childhood with gender dysphoria. So that's when you experience discomfort or distress because there is a mismatch between the sex you've been assigned at birth and your gender identity. And this is also the name for the clinical diagnosis for someone not feeling comfortable with the sex they were assigned at birth. We should be giving appropriate support for those who need it, whether medical or pastoral, not telling them they can't use a certain bathroom or you can't go and play with the other children. We should be asking for evidence and support from those who are experts in the field, not dismissing the likes of Stonewall. The government guidance will not protect children. Ministers are more interested in fighting culture wars to fire up the electoral base ahead of the general election than providing help to marginalised communities. Pink News reports that, from a site of a leaked version of the guidance coming forward, that it would breach the Equality Act, and it could be in danger of breaching other parts of the law. Government plans that would see schools require parental consent before teachers can recognise pupils' social transition is contrary to Section 3 of the Equality Act. A public law solicitor also told Pink News that they can't see how it would satisfy legal safeguarding duties, especially if pupils are outed to hostile parents or guardians. This motion risks putting young people with gender dysphoria at risk, not those who they share spaces with, as well as calling for this council to take actions that could be against the law. For these reasons, the Liberal Democrat Group cannot support this motion. In Peterborough, we recently had our Pride March and celebration, which was a fantastic day, allowing everyone in Peterborough to be who they are and celebrate that. And many members of this council were present. We fly the pride flag outside this town hall in support. Whether we identify as LGBTQ+ ourselves or if we are allies, we have a duty as councillors to stand up for those who need our help. I urge all councillors to do that duty by voting against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiggin. We've now got Councillor Howard.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've obviously got the weight of the motion itself, which has been discussed, but I really want to focus on what the motion is trying to do. And the motion is trying to request that the Cabinet member reviews the national guidance once published. Show me a Cabinet member who doesn't do that as part of their brief already. That is a daily exercise to be aware of the national governance and what you should be doing. It asks officers to consider it. Again, goodness me, officers of a specific portfolio with specific legislation brought down from a central government will of course look at it. It doesn't need to be written on this piece of paper. It's like asking people who wake up, brush your teeth. If that's your routine, that's your routine. This is very much the same. You know, it's an insult, frankly, to a very experienced Cabinet member who, I have no shadow of a doubt, will already look at the legislation as soon as it comes down and guidance and act on it with their officers. Would the Cabinet member work with the schools that are in their portfolio and in their control if they're able to? Yes, of course. That doesn't need to be in a motion again. These things that are being asked for in this motion is night and day for what officers and the Cabinet member is already doing and will do every single day they're a cabinet member. The rest of the motion is very weighty, but let's look at the very, very simple bones of what this motion is doing. It's asking the cabinet member to do what the cabinet member already does, and it's asking officers to do what they already do every day. All we need is national guidance and national advice, and when that comes, it doesn't need this motion for a cabinet member to carry out the guidance or officers. That happens already. I don't really see what this motion is doing other than trying to politic a very sensitive issue that is already going to be handled perfectly well by the cabinet member and officers that we have already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. And now call upon Councillor Andy Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A very important motion has been brought to Council, and I take on board entirely what the opposition members are saying about the fact that it should have been published on the 20th of July, and then there were certain views that it would have breached equalities and so on, so it's gone away for reconsideration. I think what I'm looking at is what the intention is of this motion. Here we've had great conflict at the school gates, with parents being very concerned about what's being taught. We know that there is confusion and uncertainty in school leaders about what's the proper guidance to be given. So we need to make sure that parents understand that when the government guidance is here, that we will be foursquare behind that, and in particular, that element that we do know it's been released already by the Minister, which is that parental interests in the well-being of their children should be paramount, and they should be made aware of what's going on. So we're here to try to provide reassurance to our communities that this council is fully behind what the government is trying to do, and trying to reassure school leaders that when the guidance comes we will support it and we will ask them to support it. So it's not a conflicted motion at all. And I completely understand what Councillor Howard was saying in terms of a cabinet member would always be doing this anyway. I completely agree, but here we're dealing with parents who are concerned about how this particular issue is being handled right now, with a level of confusion that exists within all the different organisations that are advising school leaders. So we have to be absolutely clear where we stand is that we will support the guidance as and when it comes out. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, does anybody else wish to contribute to the debate? Councillor Harper and Councillor Ray.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, to me, this motion tends to insinuate that the cabinet member, officers, schools and teachers are just not doing their job properly, and in some way they need to improve. Now, while this might be the case, because we've heard there are some anecdotal evidence that it's happened in some councils' ward, and I don't doubt that, it doesn't mean that all schools need to improve. Excuse me, lost my page. To me, the motion is premature and clearly politically motivated. We should wait for the guidance to be produced and then look at it and see if there's anything we need to get involved with. But please don't doubt that governors, teachers, parents, officers and cabinet members will do the best for the children of this city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies for speaking so much tonight. I've spent a week and a half in the field, which was pretty much in silence, so I'm making the most of it. Members have questioned that this motion discusses guidance that's not yet been published. The motion asks that when it's published, we review it and promote it. This is the same as when we set out our plan and timeline for debating a budget that's not yet been written. We're agreeing this in advance so we can act straight away as efficiently as possible. The motion isn't to decide if we like the guidance, but to agree to review it, then to promote it only when it has been reviewed. Why would we wait for it to come out, then come to council with this motion, to then agree to review the guidance, review it and then promote it? How much of a delay would that cause, delaying the protection and safeguarding of children by not getting this guidance out there? Other comments were about this not needing to be a motion, as it's already been handled, in which case there shouldn't be any reason to vote against it. By coming to full council gives all of us the opportunity to input on this, rather than just leaving it to the cabinet member. We can all contribute and we can all be part of this reviewing process. I'm supporting the motion because in simple terms, it sets things in play for us to review the guidance at the earliest opportunity after publication. It's been delayed, but it'd be good to get this done as soon as possible and then promote it straight into the schools.
Okay, if there aren't any more speakers, Councillor Fitzgerald.
I will be very, very brief, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the motion, and I understand the reticence about whether the guidance is published or not published. I think it lays out the core of it, and what Councillor Ray just articulated is very good. But I'm also supporting the motion because this motion hasn't come here by accident. It's been articulated to members from particular communities, in particular that have raised concerns about what is going on in schools. That's why I will support it, because I'm going to take what they're telling me and the rest of the members at face value as being bona fide concerns. And I think there'll be many people on the opposite side as well will recognise that. So to me it doesn't do any harm to say that we will review it once published and promote it, which is what you would expect bread and butter. I think John Howard said that in terms of, so I agree. So it doesn't do any harm just to agree that we will do that, and it might give some reassurance to those members of the public that have concerns that we are taking those concerns seriously and collectively, again, whether it's through scrutiny or where else, we can say we're working on it, we're aware of it, we're ahead of the game, come and tell us what your concerns are. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else want to speak? Councillor Tholbaum.
Just a quick one. There's a few motions. To be honest, I'm thinking about starting a new society. The society of wasting time on pointless motions. It's pointless. And to be honest, I actually think the Conservatives don't realise they're actually running the administration. I think they're practising for being in opposition, because all I've seen is pointless opposition motions. I just don't understand it. Let's start a society wasting pointless energy on pointless motions. That's it, thanks.
Okay, it's probably a matter of opinion whether the motion's pointless or not, but okay, so if there are no other speakers, then Councillor Khan, you've already spoken to second the motion, so now go to Councillor Hussain. You have up to 3 minutes for summation.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, it was mentioned earlier, it's a Conservative government, Conservative MP and Conservative administration. So obviously we've had some steer as to what will be in this guidance. Although it's been delayed, the thing is it is statutory, so it will be implemented by the council. I'm not arguing that. All I'm saying is that within that guidance there is a steer that whereas before there wasn't parental interest noted, in the new guidance there will be. So in the last line where it says parents and carers are involved and kept informed, that's what we're asking, to ensure that when this guidance comes out, that the council, the officers and schools are instructed to ensure that there's a change in their policy to ensure that parents are involved in their children's safeguard and upkeep, mental health and education, and especially when it comes to RSE. Councillor Wiggin mentioned that about Stonewall. The thing is, Stonewall guidance or their lobbying never mentioned or failed to mention the role of parents. This isn't about adults and the LGBT community. This is about children and their education and protecting children. Councillor Howard mentioned again, he seems to have missed the point. I'm saying to them that we've not disagreed that this is statutory. We're saying that parents, as they've raised the issues with us as well, we're telling parents within the public that, look, we are listening to you. There is guidance coming out, and this council backs, in ensuring that your children are protected and that your opinions, when it comes to raising your children, are, considered by schools as well. So I hope that members, change that view and sort of understand what this motion was about. There was a mention of it being a pointless motion. Well, I beg to differ. If you ask the parents that, the hundreds of parents that were outside the schools, ask them if this is a pointless motion. Ask the parents that are raising these concerns day in, day out. So, this motion doesn't change the law, but we as councillors would be making the first stand to support parents and children by supporting this motion. I understand, it may be difficult for Labour councillors because of their parliamentary candidate that's been selected, who was a trustee of Stonewall. But I'm asking them to,
Councillor Jamil, what's your point?
No, he seems...
Sorry, could you say whether it's a point of...
Yeah, 2013, point of order.
Point of order.
Because the Speaker seems to assume he knows everything about what I think, what my fellow councillors think. It's a personal attack, signed from Mr Bristow, attacking Labour Party credit. There's no room for this. We've had good debates, and he's had to go and ruin this by saying this. I think that comment was out of order.
I don't think it's a breach of the standing orders to make personal attacks on people. That happens quite often in this council chamber. So I think if I could ask Councillor Hussain to continue.
Just to clarify, also Councillor Amjad mentioned that this was a 2017 guidance by Conservative government. The foundations of RSE were a framework laid by a Labour government in 1999 when they promoted a 10-year teenage pregnancy strategy aimed at reducing the rates of teenage pregnancy, various local implementations of strategy. It also proceeded to repeal the section of 28 local Government Act in 1988 for both the promotion of homosexuality. So what I'm trying to say is the foundations of this start with a Labour government, not a Conservative government.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wiggin, what type of point?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a statement of accuracy. Councillor Hussain stated that Stonewall don't do anything with parents. That's not true, and I'm looking at their website right now about their guidance for working with schools, parents and carers, both of LGBTQ plus children, where they're worried about, and parents who are concerned about what it means to be LGBTQ plus or have concerns about people in their community don't understand what it means. So they do that. So to say they don't is untrue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I will allow, as you finish, I will allow Councillor Hussain to respond briefly to the point of accuracy if you want to. Okay, fine. Okay, I'm fairly sure this motion is not agreed, so I hand over to Pippa Turvey to conduct the vote on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so we are now moving to the vote on motion number 4 from Councillor Hussain in relation to guidance to schools regarding transgender students. To vote in favour, you will need to press the green plus button. To vote against, press the red minus button. And to abstain, press the yellow 0 button. The vote is now live. If your microphone base is not flashing blue, please do raise your hand. Okay, thank you, members. The vote is now closed. That's 21 in favour, 12 against and 20 abstaining. So the motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, Pippa. So we now move to motion number 5 from Councillor Nicola Day. Councillor Day, would you like to move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, this is an important motion. This is necessary given the zero carbon reduction work now taking place at the Council. I've worked really closely with the Head of Climate Change and Environment on the actions of this motion and with our Principal Climate Change Officer. I've carried out lots of my own research around the subject, as you'll see from my citations on the motion, and I've had input from Peterborough Trade Unions Council. As the motion notes, the Council can play an important role in educating our communities on the importance of tackling climate change and options to reduce emissions. However, as we work towards reducing these carbon emissions, we must ensure we do so in a just and fair manner to ensure all groups and individuals feel included and that no one is left behind. This is why this motion asks officers to coordinate climate debate talks and workshops to engage people in the city from all backgrounds and invites discussion and dialogue with trade unions and employers' federations. We must ensure that as we transition to net zero, there are opportunities for employers and employees to be reskilled, retrained, and that new green job opportunities are created within the local economy. I'll just give you a bit of a case study of what's happened in Spain. In Spain, with the Spanish Just Transition Strategy, it aims to respond to the socio-labour impacts generated by the Just Transition processes, promoting the creation of decent work together with social cohesion. The strategy contemplates an urgent action plan for coal regions and power plants undergoing closure to address the social impacts of these policies. The Spanish experience is a true example of social innovation. It promotes and manages the energy transition processes and its effects through social dialogues at all levels, mainly with the trade union and employers' confederations, the companies and workers affected and their representatives, and regional and local authorities. The most innovative mechanism that's been implemented in Spain is the Just Transition Agreements. There are more than a dozen of these agreements spread across the Spanish autonomous territories that are mostly affected by these coal closures. What is most interesting is that the numbers of companies and workers affected by the closures is far smaller than the number of companies and jobs contained in the thousands of public and private initiatives that are already being mobilised. So a just transition approach is needed to ensure everyone is offered the opportunity to flourish in their community and the right to necessary basic services that allow them to make their own choices in life and to feel safe in a changing world. As the motion states, those economies that are better placed in the transition will have better opportunities. Let's make sure that Peterborough has these opportunities. This motion, if passed, will be groundbreaking. This kind of motion has not been passed on any other council before. And I will ensure that the actions are taken forward in a measurable way. Members, I ask for you to vote for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Wiggin, would you like to second the motion and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to second the motion, and I reserve my right to speak until later.
Right, okay. Could I see any other people who wish to speak at all? Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Day, for your motion, which I support. We had very good conversations about the principles of just transition, i.e. not using a stick to move things, but using encouragement and support. I've very much seen that in the Pensions Committee work with certain companies who, indeed one that was very much involved in the black economy, and by that I mean oil and exploration and so on, and has now turned into green energy completely as a result of working cooperatively with that particular company. So it's only right that we have that approach. I think all of the different points that are covered in this particular motion are very sensible. And a lot of them you could do anyway as chair of the Scrutiny Committee, but I think it's very good to bring this sort of issue to full council where we can have it properly debated. I personally support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coles. Anybody else want to speak at all? I don't see anybody. In which case, we go to Chris Wiggin. Do you want to exercise your right to second the motion?
Just very briefly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to commend Councillor Day for her work on this, because I know she's put a lot of time and effort into bringing this motion to council, and I thank everyone for their support.
And Councillor Day, did you want to respond to the debate at all?
No, just thanks for the support, and I will ensure that this work is certainly taken through the Climate Change Environment Committee. Thank you.
There's been no dissension, so is the motion agreed? Agreed, thank you. Right. Turn over the page. So, we now move to it says motion from Councillor Cole, but I believe Councillor Hemorrhage is going to be proposing it. So, Councillor Hemorrhage, would you like to move your motion on behalf of Councillor Cole, who is unable to attend this evening? There is an alteration to this motion, which is set out in the additional information pack. If any member objects to the altered version of the motion being moved, please can you now say so, in which case I take it as being agreed that you're entitled to move the motion in its amended form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't read what the motions say because we've got it all in front of us. But our children that are care leavers can be the most vulnerable in society. As a council, we need to protect our care leavers to build a successful future for themselves. I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Jackie Allen for support on this motion, because we have come to a suitable agreement. Up and down the country, 46 Six councils has already passed similar motions to ensure that our care leavers are a protected characteristic, and we would like to see all councillors support this motion as it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sandra Bond, would you like to second the motion and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
I'm more than happy to second this motion and reserve my right to speak later. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other people wish to speak on it? Is it agreed then? Okay. Thank you. So the motion is agreed. Thank you. So we now move to motion 7. Councillor Iqbal, would you like to move your motion as set out in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. One of the great ironies is that when it comes to public transport, the public have no say over buses. Buses matter to thousands of people across Peterborough and the villages, but over the last 13 years, we have seen a broken bus system that is failing communities. Britain is one of the few places in the developed world that hands operators power to slash bus services and hike fares with little say for the communities who depend on them. Decades of failed deregulation have led communities with little say over the essential services they rely on. The story of the 36. The story of Stagecoach's decision to ex the 36 bus service on 30 July is the latest example of the hold that the private operators have over our public transport. Firstly, let me say thank you to the campaigners from all backgrounds who have spoken out against Stagecoach's decision. Scrapping the 36 will mean that there is no direct bus link between Thorney and Eye. This is particularly important for Thorney residents who need to travel for doctor's appointments. The 36 also provides a link between Eye and Peterborough city centre. But this is just the last cut to bus services in Peterborough and the villages. Last autumn, Stagecoach East pulled the plug on 18 bus routes, leaving the taxpayer to pick up the cost of saving services. The combined authority stepped in to subsidise the routes with an expected cost of 3.5 million in the financial year to March 2024. It is time to end the second-class status of buses and bus users. Thousands of bus routes have been lost in England since 2010, with 175 million few miles being driven by English buses compared to 5 years ago. We have lost 1 in 4 bus kilometre travelled in our region since 2016. And here is the reality. Britain is the only country in the developed world where bus operators have the power to set routes and fares with no say for local communities. The government has handed operators enormous power to raise fares and slash routes, and in many cases cut communities off altogether. It is Stagecoach who have cancelled the 36 bus service and no one else. It is Stagecoach who are holding the public to ransom and wanting the taxpayer to pick up the tab to keep a service going. It is First Group who refused to step and add a stop in Eye, which is why we need a new deal for buses. We need a new deal for buses. Firstly, we need a fair deal on funding. The government only spends £16 per person on public transport. In our area, they spend £32 per person in Yorkshire and £36 per person in East Midlands. Secondly, we need the public put back into public transport with local accountability over bus services. This motion commits Peterborough to support the principle of bus franchising, giving local authorities the power to run a bus network for the public good, not just subsidies individual services. Residents and the city would be better served by a franchise bus network that allows local input into services and a wider network across the area. It is high time we work together to build the bus network residents' needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Thorburn, would you like to second the motion and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to second it and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay. I understand it's Councillor Allen next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Iqbal. It's heartwarming that a Central Ward councillor, a city councillor, has an interest in rural bus services. It's laudable, and I really appreciate it, and I can't disagree with much that you've said. It is interesting also to note that it's the combined authority that's the overseer of bus services, and I trust that the Labour councillors will ensure that the combined authority's Labour mayor stumps up some money to fully fund the rural services that we do need. And as a rural councillor, I can assure you that the bus services are used, albeit not a lot, but for some people the route between Thorney and Eye is essential because the doctor's service in Thorney now sends its patients to the village of Eye. So the link is needed. I'm a bit concerned about the expedient minibus that's going to be put on, because I have a letter from the bus strategy manager of the combined authority pointing out that that little route between Eye and Thorney only has 7 customers a day. So it's very difficult for that service to be sustainable unless it has funding. And I take your point that the first bus service, which doesn't stop in Eye, really should do, because that would be the obvious answer. The bus would then route from Thorney via Eye into Peterborough. But I'm not arguing with your motion, I am supporting it, but just highlighting those issues. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got 4 more speakers: Councillor Chris Wiggin, Councillor Elsey, Councillor Hogg and Councillor Simon. So we go to Chris Wiggin first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Liberal Democrat Group will be supporting this motion. We have argued for a long time that we support bus franchising as a way of improving our bus services. We agree with everything that's been said about the loss of service between Eye and Thorney and Peterborough. Also, just to mention, for the benefit of Councillor Allen, at the Grove Scrutiny last week, we gave the combined authority representative quite a grilling on bus services as part of our scrutiny of the bus plan. This covered rural buses in great detail because it's where particularly lacking, but also other services. And I'd also, although I'm sure Councillor Elsey will get to this as well, like to reassure the gentleman who spoke about the buses in Wittering earlier that this was discussed at great length as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiggin. So Councillor Elsey is...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As somebody who represents a rural ward who has no bus service, I fully support this. Nick Johnson is actually coming to meet myself and a number of others, and yourself included, to discuss the Wittering issue. We're in a situation where we have hundreds of service men and women that we're sending off to defend our country, and telling their spouses that they can sit in Wittering and can't, and if they want to go to the doctor's surgery, then they can walk 10 miles down the side of the A1. There's no bus service to anywhere outside Wittering. There's no bus service for Sutton, there's no bus service for Wansford, there's no bus service for Aylesworth and Castor, but Wittering is of a prime concern because we have hundreds of people there, literally hundreds of people who are now marooned on a housing conurbation with nowhere to go. So I fully support this motion, and yeah, I fully support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hogg.
Sorry, I thought there were more people in front of me. So yes, I just want to keep it brief. I haven't used that one recently. So we are broadly supportive of this. Ultimately, in order to encourage, I use that word advisedly, encourage people out of their cars, we need to make sure that there is an alternative for them to be able to use to get about our city. And at the same time, what that then does is it does mean that the people that are unable to have their own transport, but cars, what have you, older people, people that are disabled, etc., 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 younger people are then able to afford to be able to get about, to be able to get into Peterborough from Wittering, from Eye, from Thorney. It is really essential that we make sure that our bus service is fit for purpose, so that all of our society is taken care of in terms of their transport needs. This whole thing about the 15-minute cities, ultimately we need to have a proper bus service to be able to sustain a way of getting around our city that doesn't necessarily mean that people have to go out and buy a motor vehicle and use that motor vehicle on a daily basis. So I will be absolutely supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Councillor Simons, who I believe is now the Cabinet Member with Transport responsibility.
I am, Mr Mayor, thank you. Yeah. Well, obviously I fully support, and it's right what Councillor Hogg says, we need a fit-for-purpose bus service, and obviously Combined Authority are doing a review are in process of doing the review, and we welcome that and look forward to franchising, I do personally. So we'll just see what happens. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And we go back to Councillor Tholborn, who reserved your right to speak on that. Sorry, and before we do that, Councillor Fitzgerald wishes to speak.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I wasn't particularly aware, like Councillor Hogg, you were concluding things. So a couple of things. Look, this is all going to come down to money, all right? That's what it's about. But here's what needs to happen. If you've ever looked into how you start a bus company, and I suggest you do, you'll see how complicated it is and how it has to go through the Traffic Commissioner. So we need some deregulation to allow more operators, smaller operators, into the market that can offer community solutions. Now, whether it's an enhanced partnership or franchising, jury's out on that at the moment. As you know, I sit on the board of the Combined Authority, very much involved in the discussions. In fact, it's me that's orchestrated a conversation with members of the Combined Authority and the bus companies, because wouldn't it be sensible to talk to the people who run buses before we make a jump into franchising or enhanced partnerships? Because it's one of those, be careful what you wish for. The Mayor put a precept on last year to cover the shortfall in the bus money. Trust me, that's a drop in the ocean, because when the funding runs out, the grant funding, I can tell you now it'd be about 8 million short. So we talk about 3.5 million. My estimation is what's coming down the road in terms of what I know about current services that may or may not continue. And let me tell you, we've got services running in Peterborough. It's £74.50 a passenger. There's another one in Cambridgeshire that's running at £124.50 a passenger. That's how little they're used. So there's a lot of discussion about this. So let's be real when you talk about a fit-for-purpose bus service. There is no such thing unless somebody, taxpayers, are prepared to pay for it. Now we give a precept to the Combined Authority of, I can't remember what it is, 3.5 million, something like that, and the County Council give more. It ain't enough. That's for the service we've got now. And when the bus companies also get a grant, but then there's another grant that's due to end next year. So it's going to get worse. It ain't going to get better. The 36 bus, now bear in mind, put yourself in their shoes. If this is your business, the 36 bus loses £14,000 a month. That's why Stagecoach have stopped it, and you can't blame them. Because if it was your money, your business, you'd be going, why am I doing that? And you could say to the Combined Authority, let's subsidise and put the 36 bus on at 7 people a day. What do you think the cost per passenger is on that? So you have to understand that providing a bus service like Stagecoach do or anything else is not going to be cost effective unless you
Councillor
think
Fitzgerald, could you draw
I'll wrap up. Unless you are prepared to be paying £100 a journey. So it needs some serious thought, people. But how do you pay for it?
Okay, thank you.
That's what you need to decide.
You've had your time. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to the comments of a number of my colleagues, as people are aware, this has been a very big issue, in particular with the 36, but for all rural communities. And it's something that I know all political sides have kind of got together to agree that this is an important service for those that do use it. And speaking to residents on the doorsteps, even those that don't use it, appreciate how important it is for those that can. Whether it's getting to your hospital appointments or not, whether it's getting to visit family in nearby villages or to use the facilities, it's a vital service, and hopefully this minibus will be as adaptable and accommodating as the buses that we've currently got. As the leader said, we're currently already paying a precept of £12 for a Band D property towards the mayor for transport provisions and buses in particular. Well, the 4,000 odd properties that are in Ithorny and Newborough, put that together and it's contributing, because like you say, £37, £107, however much it may be per user, is a very steep amount. But this is a very important service. I fully back this motion because I think it's an important thing that we deliver, not just for Ithorny and Newborough, but across the board. But it does also highlight that there is a lot of work required to come together to look at how we set these things in place, working with the combined authority that has the responsibility at the moment to try and make sure that we're not on the defensive every time a company tries to cut it from underneath us, but that we're working with them on a proactive strategy.
Okay, is Councillor Alan Dowson wishes to speak.
The councillor mentioned his surprise that the people on this side, particularly the Labour councillors, should be concerned about the rural villages. If I could remind them, and the Mayor will confirm this, that last year we held a meeting in the Mayor's Parlour for all the rural councillors, the parish councillors, because we were made aware that Castor, Aylesworth and Wittering were going to be charged an extra £8, were they? And they didn't have a bus service. And we were condemned to a certain extent for holding a meeting in the Mayor's Parlour which was political. It wasn't political, it was asking the residents of the rural villages exactly what was their issues, what was the cause, and what did they want to do about rural transport. So we are councillors for the whole city and not just for certain wards. And the rural area is important to us as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dowson. That's a very good point. So if there's nobody else, then I will now go to Councillor Thorburn. Do you want to exercise your right to second the motion?
I agree. I appreciate all the input and the support that we've given. Just a quick response to the leader of the Tories, the council. Sorry, I was similar to you, thinking about buses as a business and the 12 grand they was losing 8 weeks ago. I then got contacted as a ward councillor in the city by businesses and charities in and around my ward, including part of the city centre, when the 36 bus, there was being told on the bus it was being cancelled. And the economic cost to that bus, to the businesses that spoke to me, was substantial. So I've actually changed my attitude. I actually see the buses as part of the infrastructure now, no different to broadband, the roads, because these, one example, 50% of one business's staff came in on the 36 bus, and that business wasn't viable without that bus. So the financial implications far outweigh the money that you was talking about, £12,000 a month. The numbers I was told went way beyond that. In this city, of the lost revenue that would happen because of them buses. And then you express that out, expand that out to all the other villages that are short. This motion is dealing with that. It's actually putting buses as part of the infrastructure, and it's a different way of looking at it, and it's a different way for me looking at it as well, I've got to be honest. So I urge you to support it. And I was actually, we had a little pop at the mayor. I was the one who raised the 36 bus with the mayor 6 weeks ago, and his response was quite impressive, to be fair, and he actually did something about it. He responded quickly, and we actually got things done. So I was quite impressed with that. But I'm part of the infrastructure. Let's support this motion, and let's start moving things forward. I hope you all support it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rickbard, did you want to respond to any of the points?
Mr. Mayor, I won't say anything. I'll just agree to it.
Okay. In that case, is the motion agreed then? Agreed. Right, okay, we now move to item 13A. This is in relation to the third report of the Independent Improvement and Assurance Panel. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you therefore like to move the recommendations that are before us?
I'm happy to move it as detailed in the papers before us tonight, Mr. Mayor, at item 13A.
Okay, so this is a report from the panel. So, Councillor Allen, would you like to second the motion and speak now, or reserve your right to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers, any other contributors? Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we on page 94? Just to be...
It's 93, I believe, yeah.
My question relates to page 94.
Page 94 is part of the report, so please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Can the Leader of the Council confirm that there is no wavering in implementing of the approval panel recommendation, and based on the collaboration between the administration and the opposition groups, are we still at a risk of statutory intervention?
Right, so that is a point in the debate, so when Councillor Fitzgerald comes to do his summation, he can respond to that.
2.2.
Are there any other people wish to make a contribution? I'm not seeing any. Councillor Harper.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question? Do we have a representative to ask the questions, or are we asking the leader?
I understand. I was told earlier that there are no representatives from the panel here, but that they may be observing it on the YouTube. Okay, so Councillor Harper, if you want to carry on.
Yeah, it's a point of clarity really within the report. Page 98. It's got in there towards the bottom, Opportunity Peterborough remains an active part with the council's leader on the board. Now, a recent leaders meeting, the leader was himself was at pains to state that he wasn't a director on Opportunity Peterborough, that this report does say that. So I just wanted a clarification whether which one is the right.
I can answer that, Councillor
Okay,
Harper.
Councillor Fitzgerald, you will have a chance to summate on the motion.
I'll make a note.
Yeah,
Mr.
okay,
Mayor.
so you can answer it then. And I think if I can make a suggestion, if there's any questions that arise that Councillor Fitzgerald can't answer, maybe the Chief Executive could take them back to the panel and for future occasion. Councillor Iqbal, you've already spoken, so what is your...
I just want some clarity, Mr. Mayor. I'm a bit confused because I've got about a couple of questions on this item. So how do I ask them in one go, or would I get an opportunity? But my understanding was that you're going to go page by page, and then if anybody has any questions, they could ask. So I just want some clarity on that.
I'm sure Rachel will correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a motion that's been put forward. So members, it's a report. So members can have up to 3 minutes to speak on the report. In your contribution, you can ask a question if you want to, and then at the end of the debate, Councillor Fitzgerald has a chance to summate, so he can answer the questions if he's able to. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Would I get an opportunity to ask those questions then? Yeah. Okay.
Well,
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Speak. So you have to ask somebody else to ask it. Okay, I'm being advised that I can allow you to ask a further question if you want to. So, do you want to? Sorry, do you have a further question?
You want me to ask the questions now? Is that all right? Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
If you could go through all your questions. And
thank you very much. I just wanted that clarity. Thank you very much. So do you want me to repeat the first question? You've got that, right. Okay, then I've got another one. It's 4.31, page 99. The panel's view is that the council is making progress. It does not suggest that it is making good, average, or significant progress. Can the Leader of the Council comment on the level of progress the Council is making under his leadership to meet our set targets, and what are the risks and issues that remain to be tackled?
Okay, if you can ask all your questions and then he gets a chance to answer them later.
He's asked me to do all the questions, right? Okay, so the last question, Mr. Mayor. What reassurance can the Leader of the Council provide to the Chamber that the quality of the decision-making will not be affected, and there will be a high degree of continuity in the Council's policies and plans, whereas minority-led administration from 30 was reduced to 26, and from 26 to 23, and considering that there is no over-control, what assurance the Leader can provide there will not be a loss of focus on the drive to deliver a vision of the city, and there is no risk that the focus of the administration can only be on short terms, very local, and on award-related issues.
Is that a particular paragraph?
Yes, page 11, 4.3.2.
Okay, so...
100, sorry. Thank you.
Is that all your questions?
Those
now?
are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Does anybody else wish to contribute at all? Fine, okay. So who was reserving the right to speak? It was Councillor Allen. So would you like to reserve your right to speak? You can choose to answer some of the questions if you want to, but this is entirely...
No, I have nothing to add at this stage.
Just before Councillor Fitzgerald summates on this, I think it might be a useful learning point if maybe when we get future panel reports, if we invite somebody from the panel to actually appear at the meeting, so we can actually ask them questions. Is that something that people would find helpful? Yeah, okay. Right.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, it does actually say in the report they would be here.
Do you want to comment?
I can
okay,
answer that.
Apparently the chair of
Yes.
the panel is actually on holiday, otherwise she would have been here. Is that correct? Okay, fine. Fine. So
Okay.
Councillor Fitzgerald, you've got up to 3 minutes to
Okay.
respond to the question. I'll be flexible on the time because you have been asked quite a large number of questions.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can. So the chair, I believe, is either watching or reviews the meeting. The panel and others review all of the meetings, so they see all of this. So, Councillor Harper, I'll deal with your question first, because you've asked it a number of times, and you've got to believe me when I say what my understanding of the situation is. And I think it's been clarified by Adrian Chapman for you, and the Chief Executive. I, along with others, was a member of OP as a director. That company is dormant. I've had no dealing with it. I didn't even know I was still on it until somebody pointed it out. I wasn't consulted at all, as was being insinuated about a recent planning issue. No idea whatsoever, and never even entered my head. It's dormant. I remain a director, and that's probably just to keep the company going, but there is no reason for me to be on it. And if anything, I'd be happy to come off it. And I couldn't even tell you who the other director is, but it just was one of the requirements. But it ceased trading probably over a year ago. Who was it? It might be Andy. We don't know because it's not had any airing or anything, any meetings, any discussion. For all intents and purposes, it is no longer trading but remains an active company. So I hope that finally puts that to bed for you. Councillor Iqbal, 2.2 you're asking me about. Let me just get that. I can't even find it. Oh, here we go. We're always at risk of intervention. The instability in the council, which we won't go into reasons why, wherefore, it is what it is. But it doesn't promote a picture of stability as far as DLUC are concerned or as far as the panel are concerned. So yes, we've had some change. It caused some instability in terms of the confidence of DLUC, but I think they've been reassured because the collaborative nature of how we've worked would still remain. Somebody said to me the other day, or it was muted, will we still have FSWG? Yes, of course we will. FSWG, and again for clarity, was started by me and Gillian, long before the panel. The panel never even existed. It wasn't even a thought then. It was started when Gillian was still here because we wanted to improve collaboration on the budget. And that work continues, and I don't expect that to change in the sense we all need to get on and work for the benefit of the council to try and keep the ship sailing and keep the services running. So you ask about, you perhaps better ask Matt, actually, if he wants to comment, Mr. Mayor, which he can do, because Matt has an overview of whether we're good, excellent, very good. I would say we're excellent in terms of the progress we've made, and all it shows is continuous improvement right up to this latest iteration of this report. It's not the same as it was. It's going, there's still a way to go, but good progress has been made, which in my view is excellent. What was the other part you asked me?
You're reduced to 23 members.
Okay, well look, that it doesn't matter because we've set out the agenda for the administration. That hasn't changed. But as I keep hearing from Councillor Harper and others, we've got to do something different. Well, we're all sitting in a room together. Come tell me what the something different is. And if anybody else has got something different, either through the FSWG or another forum, Let's find out what that is, rather than just saying it, but not actually articulating what it is. Because we are working collaboratively. There are 23 of us, and everybody has to agree on a way forward. So I'll repeat again. My door has always been open. We might not agree on everything, and whatever petty, personal, who likes who and who doesn't like who, move on, forget it. Let's work
Councillor
together.
Fitzgerald, could you draw you are considerably over the...
I'm done. If that's answered your questions, I'm done, Mr. Mayor, and I'll finish with, we should continue talking and work together.
Okay, thank you. I am advised that if members have further questions on this report, it is going to the Cabinet and it is going to the relevant scrutiny committee and to the FSWG. Because there isn't anybody from the panel here, but our Chief Executive does attend the panel, so I'm just going to have a break with procedure and just ask him if he wants to make any further comments on it.
I'll keep it brief. Risk of intervention is significantly less. I spoke to the Chair this week. We are still forecast to come out of intervention end of December, roundabouts. There is always that chance, though, and you'll see the report, the budget situation is quite volatile. That is like all councils at the moment, particularly around children's pressures. We are making significant progress. You described it as a sea change from 18 months ago in terms of the culture, the attitude, the collaboration. But what the report is giving us is some very useful pointers about where we need to shift our focus. We do need that collective effort. We need a real focus on governance. We need to sort out some of the company's work still. Decision making is key. We need to upgrade the constitution, and we need to carry on with the transformation work, in particular to help tackle the budget. It isn't about budget cuts, it's about redesigning, rethinking services. But it's a very positive report, but it is giving us some very clear pointers around the trajectory, where we come from, the management team, decoupling from Cambridgeshire. There's a hell of a lot of work to do still.
Okay, thank you. On the basis of that, is this proposal is it agreed? Yeah. Okay. That we agree to note it. Hiller, what type of point is it?
It's a point of accuracy, information. I have a question.
A point of accuracy is fine if it is one.
Fine. Point of accuracy. Councillor Fitzgerald apparently has forgotten that he was a director of OP, still is a director of OP, and made the statement that in so many words that OP is now a redundant company. But as I understand it, Mr. Mayor, and I would like clarification from officers, OP actually funded a table at an awards ceremony recently where Councillor Fitzgerald was a guest sitting on that table. So if it doesn't have a budget, if it doesn't have legitimacy as a standalone company, I'm a little confused. Perhaps you clarify that.
I'm going to allow Councillor Fitzgerald to respond solely to that point of accuracy.
The financing of OP is now an internal budget. It has no staff, and just so it's therefore a council operation. So I wouldn't have to declare anything. I'm working on behalf of the council at those awards, as you have done many times, and many others in this room. I'm sure if we want to check back on records, we can do, but it's irrelevant because OP Limited is not trading. OP as a brand is now subsumed into the main core council business. All the staff that were working for Opportunity Peterborough Limited have chupied into the council as employees.
I think you've made that point in response to the point of accuracy. Thank you.
If I might just clarify, I wasn't asking, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't asking whether you should declare anything, Councillor Fitzgerald. That wasn't my query. My query was to clarify the status of OP, which has effectively
which I think he has done. So that's fine. Can I take it that this recommendation is agreed then? Thank you. Okay. Right, so we now move to agenda item 13B, which is in relation to the changes proposed to the leaders' scheme of delegations. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As moved and before you today.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Allen, will you second the recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to second the motion and indeed reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Any other people wish to contribute on this item? In which case, is it agreed then? Thank you. I think that's agreed. Okay, so we then move to agenda item 13C, which is in relation to the Council's revised political proportionality and committee seat allocation. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you therefore like to move the recommendations?
Again, as before you tonight, Mr. Mayor, as moved.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Allen, will you second the recommendation and either speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second and reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this item? In that case, is it agreed then? Thank you. All right, so we then move to agenda item 13D in relation to the establishment of an independent panel. Councillor Coles, would you like to move the recommendations in the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, members, before you this evening is a report seeking approval of the establishment of an independent panel, approval of the terms of reference for this panel, and approval to amend the Constitution to reflect those changes. And you'll find an updated version of this report in the additional information plaque. The establishment of an independent panel is required by the Local Authorities Standing Orders England regulations of 2001 and its amendment in 2015. These regulations make it necessary for councils to establish a panel in order to consider and advise on the dismissal of any of the 3 statutory officers of the council, those being the head of paid service, the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer. The panel is advisory only, and the decision to dismiss any of these officers would remain with full council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I was just commenting to my colleagues. Yeah, Councillor Sains, we understand you. Do you wish to second and speak now, or do you wish to reserve your right to speak?
Yeah, I'm happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Right. Are there any other contributors on this item? Okay. Is it agreed? I wish to record that I wish to abstain on this item, and I would like that to be recorded, please. Otherwise, is it agreed? Thank you. Okay. So, where are we now? The end. We've got to the end. Okay, so we now at the end of the meeting. We were thinking we might have to move the provision of extending the meeting, but we obviously don't need to. So I'd just like to thank everybody for having a fairly good humoured discussion on the items that we've had. I'd like to also repeat my invitation earlier on for everybody here is invited to come into the Mayor's Parlour. We've got some drinks and some food for you, and it's really helpful, and we also invite officers to come in as well. So thank you very much.